Hey, welcome, Doooovid here. Post-democratic debate shows. It just ended according to the version I was watching. It was pretty interesting. It was on the scene earlier today. I got some video. I did some interviews. It's pretty interesting. I'm not sure if people come around and join and want to join the discussion. I'll open it up to people to hop on and add their thoughts. Otherwise, I'm going to go straight into my thoughts, and then I'm going to share some of the video that I took earlier today. It seems that Bernie Sanders versus 2016 has relatively successfully pushed all of the candidates to the left. You had a little bit of possibly some of the more mainstream Democratic candidates that are polling very low tonight had a chance to add a more classical, less progressive voice that might possibly have some popularity. We'll see how that goes. And so there's a few interesting things. So people saw the debates. We'll see. We'll get more into that. It was more interesting outside. Tomorrow night's more interesting to me. Bernie Sanders. So it kind of touches my heart as like a Jew whose grandparents were probably socialists, to see Bernie Sanders pretty popular and on stage. And Elizabeth Warren probably has better governing experience. So in terms of actually implementing the ideas that Bernie Sanders would want to implement, probably Elizabeth Warren, who seems to largely agree with him on most of the issues, would have possibly more success in actually governing, being a lawyer, Harvard professor. So I don't think there was really too much. Marianne Williams was interesting tonight. I thought she did pretty well. It turns out someone on the street told me that she's actually 100% Jewish, which I didn't know. And and she also had a big, she had this, I'll start showing the video in a second, but she had the studio outside rented out, the Fillmore Theater. So there's the Fox Theater, and next to it is the Fillmore. So she had her watch party in the Fillmore next door and the after party. And there were a lot of people outside for Marianne. So they had a lot of Bernie people, Green New Deal protesters and stuff like that. Although in terms of right outside, it could be Marianne had the most. So we'll see if people start popping in that possibly want to join. I think Jon Vance and yeah, it does. I mean, okay, he's a Bolshevik Jew, but it's saying, yeah, that was my grandparents were, they were socialists, workmen's circle. They came over to America. My great great grandfather was a rabbi for the Workmen's Circle, which was a socialist organization that they were Bundists. They were from the German socialists, and they were proud socialists. The times have changed. So you're thinking that Bernie Sanders, with the same ideology as some of my ancestors, is quite popular. So let me show some of this video. I'm going to unplug the Okay, sorry, I was muted. Okay, thank you for the chat. Yeah, I just unmuted. So let me know if you could hear this in the chat, if you could hear the video in the chat. Yeah, I apologize, the tech issue. What I'm doing, I'm going to play the video, and hopefully the speaker computer will pump it out so the camera will pick it up, and I'll plug back in the Yeti when I'm done doing the videos. Sorry about that. So I'm going to enter screen share now. So let me enter a screen share. I apologize, a little boomer tech there. Sorry about that. Too much watching Luke Ford, and I became boomer tech. So the first video I record, right out as I'm parking my car, I'm walking towards the stadium. You could see, that Tiger Stadium all the way in back is opposite the theater. Goes the whole block. I bump into a security guard who does security at the synagogue I go to. Hey, God bless. Hey, what are you working for tonight? Okay, yeah, that man does work at the synagogue. One of the security guards from the synagogue near my house, a retired police officer, doing private security for Little Caesars Arena. So heavy security. So you see I'm walking up. We got the. It's interesting. Like I've mentioned, the security in Detroit is almost all retired police officers, and it's enough for a different issue. But so I'm just walking up. This is about 2 hours before the debate. It's possible that someone will have a ticket from me or pass. Like I'm a Detroiter. I'm going to be doing some interviews here. So they're training. So that's Fox Theater where the debate was, and people know Detroit. This Tiger Stadium right behind his Lions Stadium. I was surprised to see so Marianne people. So I'm walking through, and there's like 50 people supporting Marianne Williamson. Interviews here. So they're training for reparations. Got CNN. Not going to be able to get past this. Not sure if they got official interviews. So people have been watching CNN. They have like a tent set up outside with the Fox Theater where the debate was in the background. And when I came up, the Marianne Williamson, huge group of people, not huge, like 50 people, and they're doing a pro-reparations chant. He's on the scene here. So we got some stand for Marianne. Hey, God bless. Marianne, people chanting for reparations. Oh, you're here for Marianne. So see if she makes it into their debate with you on tonight. I don't think the street closed down. So I'm just going to record a few minute video here, and then I'm going to do a few interviews because I'm not going to be able to live stream. So I just want to get a few minutes here, get a feel for what's going on. The Bernie people, Bernie and Elizabeth Warren tonight, Fox 10. Get a feel for what kind of people are out here. Jake Sturgis didn't show. The remote possibility that I get inside, maybe we'll have some real interviews with some of the candidates. So they had a band outside playing CNN Sucks. If people know the CNN Sucks song. So as I was walking forward, I here's Joel Pollack, who I guess I don't know him that well, but I remember he works for Breitbart, the Orthodox Jew. He's been interviewed on TV, so he's wearing the yarmulke. I see Doooovid yarmulke, and it's say Shalom. It turns out it's Joel Pollack from Breitbart, California, came to cover the event. So I get up, I speak to him for a second. I guess I'll do. I'm an independent YouTuber doing it here. I've actually debated a lot of figures in alt-right. I had Jon Vance Artificial Patrick Little. I'm reading Breitbart. That's something Breitbart. So I ended the video there in order to take a picture, a selfie, and I spoke to Mr. Pollack a few minutes. That was kind of cool. I walked around through security, and then a second video. So you could see here, this is the line of people, I guess, that have tickets, and I'm not sure they had to pay for it. This 6 o'clock, so there's a lot of people who are waiting to get in hours before the event started. Outside and the presidential debates, there's online. There was a random dude running for president that I don't know if he's got 0 supporters or whatever. All people are ticketed, waiting to get in. I'm with my friend Stony Burke. That's right, for presidential candidate Stony Burke standing outside. I think if you did not get the 65,000. I did not. I'm on 0% of the polls, but I've got programs of my own that I think the public should hear about. Are you going to be on any of the ballots that you have? No, I'm not. You didn't have enough. Exactly. They saw my ideas were good. They booted me off. What's your platform? Well, one of them is that we got to get the plastics out of the oceans. And part of that is to create hemp plastic. Plastic can create hemp. Here in Michigan, we have 600 new hemp farmers. We want to give them support. That's one of my programs. Okay, I'm going to walk around. I'm going to be recording. So I'm going to come back to you. Are you signing? You got petitions or anything? Are you with Mr. Oh, God bless. So we got long line people waiting to get in. Yeah, I'm not getting in. Oh, no, I don't. Okay.
Is that beyond political?
Okay, so that was interesting. You can see the long lines of people waiting to get in, and here I got a woman who is a Marianne Williamson supporter.
Reality? No, that's my husband. And I just am so grateful that she has the opportunity to be able to give us the transition that we need. Because we are in transition.
You're not a politician.
She's the person that can guide us and lead us through the transition that we're in. Because we are in a very big transition right now, whether we call it economical, spiritual, whatever we say, we're in a major transition right now, and I feel like she can guide us.
Were you before?
I did.
Before she decided to run for
president?
I did. Okay, awesome.
Yep, I'm all about personal transformation, and she has empowered me to be more passionate about societal transformation, and I'm grateful.
I think I like Bernie. I think she's the most
Love
interesting person. Okay, God bless.
God bless.
See what happens.
God bless. Thank you.
Hey, God bless. You want to do?
So walk around. There was a Biden supporter. Interview a quick Biden supporter.
One, I really believe that he might be elected, and that is very important to me. I think a lot of the Democratic candidates show a lot of possibilities for the future, but I really think that Biden can win. Now beyond that, in terms of
Your first time in Detroit?
Yeah, so that woman, quick Biden supporter, gave her some airtime. I see Pollock outside.
Family here. I'm the only food there's a Chabad. The Rebbe father-in-law came to Detroit in 1931. There was a seat here going way back with the. Yeah, we have a Shiva here, rabbinic training school.
just graduated college.
So speak a little bit with Pollock. Here's another Williamson supporter. This one was interesting. She told me that Williamson is Jewish.
You've been following Marianne for years and continue to learn.
I was born in Michigan, right after she'd written the book Healing the Soul of America, which really addresses so many of the issues that we face now in terms of education and mass incarceration and war and such. So it's pretty prolific in that she's now here representing a different message for the masses to awaken and know that we can join together both to heal the divide in our country between culture and classes and races, and we can.
Or do you think it's a sign of the deterioration of the political class and more?
Has imploded and destroyed it. Different opinions. As I said, I have talk people through the historical and the implications of explaining systemic racism. And it's ironic, too, different things. She dropped out of college and coming out, so she got involved in it.
So that woman knew quite a bit about Marianne Williamson. It's interesting. You can see that interview in the second video. And I walk around. I walk outside of. So here you can see.
Afterwards, first she'll talk to the.
Roper alumni, my parents live on Chestnut.
There's different kinds of it.
Was Jewish. Hear a little bit of philosophy. I hadn't thought too much about Marianne's chances.
Seriously, I'm right in front of the theater where the debates are, and you see Marianne Williamson rented the theater right next door for a view party and after party. So see here the Fillmore right next to the Fox Theater. Marianne Williamson had it rented out, so pretty well funded. And I didn't stick around. I guess it was open and free to anybody. I didn't stick around. And then I exit the police protected off area and into the main protest. So first I enter the Republican area.
I'm not sure we're going to be able to get back in if I go out because I don't actually. So I'm going to say, I'm live streaming my friend from Saudi Arabia. Yeah, this is Detroit. Like I probably know quite a few of these.
So they had a tiny area here of pro-Trump supporters or anti-abortion, pro-life supporters. That woman looked familiar. I don't know if she's like the gun woman, the woman with the gun pictures. InfoWars. So I don't know if this woman's from InfoWars or something. She looked vaguely familiar, these women. I'm not sure if anyone watching knows these people, but I recognize this woman. Maybe she's from InfoWars.
As individuals, and I feel like the message of liberty does unite us.
So I just interviewed a random street guy with the Republican side talking about liberty.
And it's the complete antithesis of freedom. On the other side, the heavy police presence here.
Yeah, like the whole Detroit Police Department looked like they were outside.
I just recognize them on Twitter as gun right activists. Asking these guys around. So. Okay, so that was the Republican side. Not too many of them, relatively. I thought I recognized that woman. So I guess you didn't want to speak to this, right? So see, oh, sorry. It's a rally, not
So I'm able to walk right through. You know, it was very peaceful, actually. Everyone was very kind and friendly. You know, walk around a little bit. Here you had the Democrats for Life. It looks like they came from out of state, the Democrats from Life, just a handful of them. And then I walk in, the Young Turks were there. They were set up in this one area. They stayed there the whole time. You know, if I had stayed there, maybe I would have been able to get like a selfie or a quick YouTube shout out, but they were packed.
See if I'll be able to get a selfie or something.
I actually bumped into Eric Bollinger, like outside, like I saw him, I recognized this guy like from somewhere. It's like Eric Bollinger, I guess the former Fox reporter.
So we're live back.
So hopefully I'm not boring everyone too much with this video. So I'll just.
I got to stop, take a few pictures, walk around. So we got the Young Turks, Cenk and Mankiewicz, the Young Turks outside, and
that guy's not Mankiewicz. I thought the wrong name. I don't know who that other Turk is.
Green New Deal. God bless you, homeless people. God bless good luck. Maybe not even doing that water. Some Green New Deal. Here.
Okay, I get right in for the Green New Deal activists, the drumming and the organization. They're about to march through. The police are going to let them walk right in front of the stadium, in front of the theater for the protest, and I have that whole thing on video. Even the InfoWars girl was dancing to that chant.
Okay, let's walking. Okay.
Okay, interviewed a Bernie supporter. So it kind of touches my heart to see people out supporting Bernie. So a nice quick interview. Then I walk over and I talk to one of the people from Democrats for Life. I stood there for a minute. No one, like, they were talking to someone else, and this woman, she came from out of state, talks a few minutes about Democrats for Life. If anyone wants to check out that interview, please go ahead.
Okay, so they're letting us through.
And then this, they had the street closed off in front of the theater, and then they opened it up for the Green New Deal Bernie supporters to march in front. So, yeah, InfoWars didn't want to do an interview with me. Like, I recognized them, like I saw them out there, but now I guess they didn't want to, Doooovid to interview them. They were just covering the event. So this was actually a pretty cool march, the Green New Deal. See, pretty active.
Protesters are going to be able to go.
And, like, the whole police force was out there. Hundreds of police officers out there on horses and cars. And so they had it pretty down. Then they volunteer like Detroit security group also. I get an interview later with them.
Almost in front. Let's see if I can get closer in front. peaceful and friendly.
So I guess we get a little chant there. The Green Rally gets diverted to yell at CNN for a few minutes.
And we're glad to see people supporting Bernie. It's like I have a lot of disagreements with Bernie, but it's kind of gives me a warm feeling. People all excited about Bernie. Is it on CNN?
Okay, so they had a little band playing here. Pretty cool. Keep on going. The Abolish Iceman. It's the Episcopalian Church. I've been to events there. Not much in use. The old Anglican. I think the Archbishop of Canterbury has preached from there. Okay, so they push through the end of the event, and then they're blocking the street, and the police force them to keep on moving. And they had some abortion, pro-life protester activists, and I actually interviewed one of them. One of them I recognized from somewhere else, so I'll have some interviews with them. So when the march finishes, they let the Green New Deal marchers march all the way through in front of the theater. And then the police basically like force them to keep on moving, to go in front of Little Caesars, the pavilion there. So there's a little pressure with the police pushing him back, but altogether it was pretty peaceful. So I stick back in front of the St. John's Episcopal. They had some pro-life protesters or activists. So I did some interviews. This guy in the wheelchair was kind of like selling like anti-veteran with anti-Trump bumper stickers. I do a quick interview with him.
It's the police traffic. Yeah, I'm an independent YouTuber journalist. You want to say your piece to my audience?
I would love to. My name's Michael McCord. I'm 100% service-connected veteran. I made these bumper stickers. The first one I made was, "Excuse me, I need to go take a dump." I made that one because it made fun of the disabled. I made this one up here because he called Africans and shithole. So America, you voted for the shithole. What more can we say? I made this one here about Muslims. The way of these bumperstickers.com to support me. I'm actually using this money to buy dental implants because the VA won't give them to me. And I'm also going on the road and doing a living history that I'm sending to the Smithsonian. And hopefully you're going to sign it and make a comment on my living history.
God bless. Are you a Freemason?
Okay, so I signed his book. That man was a little bit interesting. And yeah, YouTube is holding your comments. Hi, T. I'm almost done with my video. So
Interview for my YouTube channel.
this woman was one of the organizers for the pro-life group. So I spoke to her for a few minutes. And interesting woman. If someone wants to see the interview.
Well, I have my YouTube page. Yeah, Doooovid. My viewers are more conservative.
Oh, that's my son.
Oh, God bless
That
you.
baby bear was found in a trash dumpster in Lansing.
Oh, it's horrible. Sorry.
That we buried at St. Joseph Cemetery. All of it.
Oh, yeah. You were his friend from. Where do you post it?
So this guy was a Catholic with the pro-life group, a journalist. He had actually been with Edwin Black, the author of IBM and the Holocaust. He was recording or working together with him. So we spoke for a few minutes there. It was interesting. He actually recognized me, and I didn't recognize him. But when he mentioned that, I knew right away. So we spoke a little bit. I emailed him the video. So I think I got one more pro-life demonstrator. I spoke to this guy real quick, another pro-life demonstrator.
I'm a lay rabbi. I'm doing street interviews. I studied to be a rabbi, but I'm not officially a rabbi. I ended up as a civil engineer. But
Okay, so I spoke to that guy a few minutes. And then on the other side of the street was the remnants of the people who were kind of protesting the police who were trying to push people aside, which they pretty successfully did. They cleared the street, pushed the people into the pavilion, or the people went home. Basically, that was the end of the protest. There were a few stragglers, I guess, there. This guy's kind of yelling at the police. I get a quick interview. You could hear his...
hey, we got Detroit's finest.
Okay, so I get a quick interview with this guy yelling into the megaphone, and he's kind of spewing at the police, questioning, who do they protect, the citizens of the Detroit, or possible racial questions.
Shame. It's a horrible shame.
Now, we say something to my YouTube viewers. I'm Doooovid. I'm a Detroit activist, independent journalist. I'm just trying to get the people on the street to, I appreciate you having a loud voice.
So,
and speaking up for
let me tell you something. This is what Detroit looks like. The comeback of police militarization, the comeback of corporate colonialism, the comeback of literally pillaging people and everything they worked hard for. 30 years tops have been snatched away. Our pensions compromised. Our work have been shipped away overseas, and they're giving us little small jobs that we are not getting. Detroit residents, first of all, the Democrats, I don't know, man. The Democrats have totally effed up on this. When you block citizens in a majority black city, 80% majority black city, you have blocked your demographics. You have blocked the voters. You have blocked those that will likely participate in the 2020 election. Who's not going to participate in the 2020 election because of this militarization of this police force? This is unacceptable. We came here as a peaceful demonstration to show love, to show unity, and to champion our causes that the Democrats should let everybody in. This is unacceptable. I'm sorry. I will be here. Immigrant Justice March on Woodward, 4:30 tomorrow to 5.
God bless you.
Thank you.
Yes, you all can go. Thank you.
Want to say something to my YouTube audience?
people know exactly who they serve.
Are you going to be here tomorrow night also?
Sorry?
Are you going to be here tomorrow night also?
Yeah, I hope to be. And I'm wondering when people are gonna let go of this faith or belief that they serve them, that they work for us, whatever the fuck that means. It's never been true. And my hope is, I did.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
And what do you? I mean,
And a Bernie supporter, quick interview with a Bernie supporter. And then I walked to where they pushed. Here's more pro-life activists.
God bless you, ma'am.
And so they pushed people into this pavilion here, and see a little bit. Here was one of the guys who was trying to keep everything safe and peaceful. You quick interview.
I promote different Jewish things, or interfaith, Detroit Jews for Justice. And I'm apolitical, but I try to be religious and say, God runs the world.
We're going to move out in a minute, but if you keep it quick, what do you want to know?
I just want, are you here with the Green New Deal?
Yeah, so I'm part of the Detroit safety team. My name is John. We're out here just trying to help kind of maintain peace and make sure that this march is solid and successful and productive.
So you're not favoring necessarily any candidate? Or you're just for security, or you're promoting the Green New Deal no matter what candidate?
So we don't think of ourselves as security. Security ends up being physical intervention. We're safety, and so that means kind of identifying any moments of conflict and trying to de-escalate that before it has an opportunity to get to a physical standpoint.
I didn't see any conflict here tonight.
No, nothing major.
So you're apolitical, also you're not even like a Democrat or promoting it?
Oh, personally, I haven't made a decision about this election yet. So, when making my mind, that'll be what that is.
I like the accent. I'm a man of ideas.
I appreciate
I
it.
like things more issue by issue as opposed to. So I think it's a good thing for Detroit through the debates here, and I think tomorrow might be even more exciting than tonight.
Absolutely. Listen, thank you so much. I appreciate you.
God bless for your service. Your opinions here and there. Yeah, I saw that. Is it? Yeah, God bless you. Standing up and trying to.
So here's another woman. This is a presidential candidate, Powers. Quick interview with her. Woman, didn't have enough to make it into the debates, was standing outside.
To move society forward in a better direction.
Thank you. Please stay in touch with me. This is my advisor's phone number. And do whatever you can to promote me. Democrats don't put me
Through here. Interesting people.
Okay, so that was it. That was the extent of my on the spot on the scene video recording. Pretty interesting. I plan on being out there again tomorrow night. I hope people gained and enjoyed from that. And I guess I'm glad that worked. So I'll put the link in the chat. See if anyone wants to come on and talk about some of these ideas from the Democratic debates. I don't have too much analysis to say. Like, I wanted to show these videos. I don't quite have my 1,000 subscribers, so I couldn't live stream it. If I have 1,000 subscribers by tomorrow, I will live stream it. It's possible I'll stick around longer, because Yang and some of the other candidates are, going to be around for the night. So maybe if I get a chance to speak to Yang or Gabbard, it might be worth my time to try to stick around for these debates. I messaged the Citizens reporter, Erica Halsey, if they wanted to come on. I'm not sure if any these viewers watching now want to come on, and Ultra Testosterone Super T doesn't seem like he wants to come on. Jon Vance added me on Facebook. I'm not sure if he's still watching, if he wants to come on and discuss this. And I'm not too sure I have so much interesting analysis to give. I mean, what do you got, Ultra T? What do you think of the debate? I mean, you're the only one in my chat right now. So, that's it. It's just me sitting here. I ramble. I got 9 watchers. So it's going to be interesting tomorrow night. I think will be more interesting than tonight. Warren and Sanders a little bit added. I was impressed with Marianne Williamson. I was impressed by her audience. I mean, just you see that she had so many supporters. She had together that she rented out the theater next door. They had the money together. Turns out she's Jewish. She got in. If you watch the debate, she got in there. She sounded good. So I think she came out a winner from tonight. Hypatia, thanks for tuning in. I'm not sure if you want to come on and give some thoughts. Yeah, I mean, Mayor Buttigieg, I mean, everyone performed relatively decently. There was some stuff going on tonight, but relatively, it's going to come down to a matter of governance. And the question is, what ideas do you support? We know what the Democrats want to do. Tomorrow, I think, will be a little bit more interesting. You'll have, one thing they so to say, like everyone tonight was, so to say, white. Tomorrow will be more diverse. Tulsi Gabbard, Andrew Yang, Cory Booker, Kamala Harris. We'll see if there's like round two between Kamala Harris and Biden. I saw the polling on CNN. Like Biden is really pulling out ahead. They say Biden has a lot of support among the African American base. So 25% of Democratic primary voters are African Americans, and African Americans, I think like 40% of them or something, are supporting Biden, which could be related to, he was President Obama's vice president. Obviously, that's a big strong in his corner, and maybe less progressive. I'm not sure if progressivism is as popular among African Americans as it is other minorities or white liberals. So it could be the actual progressive agenda is not as popular among African Americans. So, Kamala Harris has not been polling that well among African Americans. Actually, she's getting a smaller percent, relatively. So her attack on Biden didn't seem to do her that well, although it temporarily did her well. So we'll see if CNN tries to hype that up. Yeah, I'm going to put the Hangout link in the chat because I don't know if I have the strength to monologue now. So otherwise, it might be a quick video where I just showed some of my video. I mean, Bernie, I don't think Bernie has that much of a chance this time because the agenda has been shifted further left. So in 2016, when Bernie was more progressive and he was talking about ideas that had a mass popularity among tens of millions of Americans, but now the majority of the candidates are promoting the exact same ideas that okay, so I messaged Erica the Hangout link if she's around. She could pop on. I'm not sure if people actually watch the debate or have that much interest in it. So I'll give it a few minutes to see if anyone is coming together, wants to come on. I told Halsey he could come on also, well, I'm not sure if he's going to be streaming on his own channel. I don't know. I'm not sure it's going to be Biden. I'm just tired and he's got the media, he's got the name recognition, but as things move forward, I think Biden, he's got a lot of personality issues, a lot of things that could bring him down that, just he might not be likable enough. And, a lot of times people don't like losers. So Biden lost in the previous election, and, it's unclear whether the likelihood that, someone's going to be a winner, even though they lost before. He's pretty old. And I think Trump's too alpha that I think, he'd push Biden down because Biden's more a politician. And if it came to a head-on-head, there's really no one that it is. It's not like there's a person. It's going to be probably, who knows how many people are going to go into Iowa. So at this point right now, there could be a substantial amount of people here that are going to go all the way to Iowa. It could be, 10, it could be 15 of the 20 people, maybe all 20 of these people stick with it through Iowa. Maybe if they get zero, almost none of the votes going into Iowa will start dropping out. But at this point, no one's really talking about dropping out. Even if like 2-3 people drop out, like you need like 12 people to drop out to have a clear front runner. So, you have Warren, Biden, and Sanders, in the polls that have double digits, and beyond that, no one really has double digits. Cory Booker Kamala Harris, they're not even breaking over 10%. It's possible that something could happen where Kamala Harris or Booker could really shine tomorrow night and knock away a good percent of Biden's support. Elizabeth Warren, like, she performed well tonight, but I don't think like she's gonna. I don't think any of these people besides for Biden is going to pull it over 20%. Because Biden has the President Obama. He seems to have the support of a vast majority of the African American Democratic base. So besides for Biden, it seems unlikely anyone's going to get over 20%. Where Trump, even with like the 10, 15 Republican nominees, Trump was polling over 20%. Like, so he had a Biden type lead, and he held on to that through Iowa till the other people started dropping out. So, I mean, if you look at like Biden like that, but I mean, Biden's no Trump in that way. So even if, I like Yang or Gabbard, and there'd have to be something where, these people polling at 1 or 2% would be able to come ahead, and you'll be able to move from like 1% to 10%. So I mean, Yang he's polling it enough. Like maybe they said he's made it into the third debate. So it's remotely possible that someone like Yang, but so how's he going to go from like 2% to 15%? But he does look like he's in it for the long run. He'll stick around to Iowa. So it's possible, like, after people start dropping out, he'll start getting a few percent. But it's not looking good for anybody. Like Biden does not seem like a strong front runner, and Sanders, Warren, none of those people seem like strong front runners. So in that case, Trump seems to be looking pretty good. Obviously, the structural advantage of the Democrats. I mean, it's late at night. It's almost 11:30, so I'm not sure I want to like pop up like Wikipedia or do factual evidence checks of the exact numbers, but there's many more registered Democratic voters than there are Republicans. So the Democrat has a huge structural advantage because there's many more Democrats in America than Republicans. And the Electoral College, in the way, if it's like all or nothing states, California, New York, a lot of the big population states are very likely to go Democrat. Something like Florida, where Trump was an anomaly. I mean, Republicans have won Florida in the past, but you're looking at the electoral college map. The Democrats have an advantage in a vast majority of states. That's why Trump was like, you can't win. Like, the Democrats are expected, just off of the structural advantage of more Democrats than Republicans, to get about 300 of the electoral votes. For congressional or senatorial races, that Republicans could win the senatorial races is due to other issues like the 2 senators per state that have lower population numbers and not that much of electoral college, or to redistricting in states that have gerrymandering, where the population centers have fewer districts than the rural areas, so that even though there's more registered Democrats than Republicans, through districting measures, there could be a majority of Republican congressmen or something like that, if people know about the politics. It's like 11:30 here, and so I don't think I'm going to like do like a public study session ramble. I'm even slurring my speech, so I don't have that much to say. If no one pops on, I might just call it a quick stream, less than an hour. And I got to show some of my video. I was glad to be out there. I'm having a tough time hitting my subscription base. Like, I need another appearance or something that to get me over the 1,000, because I'm not getting enough traction. I hit. I mean, really, I'm happy with my subscriber base. So I guess I'll show this just because I only have a few people watching, and I don't have anyone coming on the show, and I didn't really prepare anything besides showing my video. But let me just show my subscriber base. So even I'm pretty happy to have the base that I had. It could be much worse, but I'm up to 972, so it's pretty close. Only 28 more subscribers to get over 1,000, so I'd be able to live stream again. And so subscribers, if you look in I really had a blow up of subscribers from appearing on Adam Green. I had quite a few subscribers from my appearances on JF, a small trickle here and there, different appearances, but like Adam Green boosted me from well over like 250 subscribers, and so I have a slow trickle of gaining subscribers, but I'm not sure. It doesn't look like I'm, sometimes the subscribers, like people may have seen me on Adam Green and subscribed, and then afterwards, decide to leave me because I wasn't as interesting. So Citizens Reporter, if you're there, you could come on. Otherwise, I'm running out of steam to monologue tonight. So I sent you the link via Facebook. I put it in the chat. But if you want to talk about the Democratic primaries, I'll keep the show running. Just because I don't really have so much steam to monologue. And thank you, Hypatia. Multiple accounts. If you want to boost me, I guess you could unsubscribe in like a few weeks. So if you get me over, okay. So, Jon.
Hello.
Okay, yeah. Thanks for adding me on Facebook. I guess we have a few rough arguments, but that's fine in the spirit of debate and politics. Did you watch the debates tonight?
No, I didn't.
I know you're Canadian, but do you keep up with American politics? I'm trying to keep this stream topical to American democratic politics.
It's kind of fascinating. Like I used to be obsessed with what America did and take cues politically what America did. Now it's kind of like the Trump discredited the Anglo-Zionist empire to the extent where now I don't really take anything seriously what comes from America. To me, it's just another shit show. So I don't know, maybe it's just because I'm more wise, or I don't know, maybe people are getting more apathetic about the political system. But
did you become a one-issue voter? The same way a lot of Jews are one-issue voters on Israel, where maybe previously you had a whole bunch of issues and collectively made a decision, where now you've kind of like one-issue racial dynamics is what you're voting on.
No, I wouldn't say that. I would say we need something that's totally different, something that's totally radical. And it's kind of sad to see a lot of American movements, grassroots movements, get suppressed, but here in Canada, they don't get suppressed as much. So my party is gaining a lot of traction. So we stand for basically a one-party theocracy, where we get rid of all of the parties and the democracy, and we only are the only ones in charge. So I feel like that's the way things should be done, especially when you have foreign policy. Because you don't hear that in American politics, though. That's the thing, is because you have your own constitution, whereas in Canada, we're still part of the Commonwealth, and we're still technically ruled by a queen. So we can say these things. Therefore, we're kind of more European in our politics than Americans.
Yeah, the Fox Theater was right across the Anglican Church, or the Episcopal, which I guess the Episcopals, I'm not sure if the Episcopals, I think they still swear loyalty to the Queen of England, but the old Episcopal Church from like 150 years ago in Detroit is still standing right there. I've been there like for a few political events or public events, but the Episcopal community of Detroit, the Archbishop of Canterbury spoke there. It came to Detroit and spoke there from a few years ago. But if you paid attention to my video, you could see like the decline of the Anglo in Detroit, where there's just like this huge, beautiful, empty Episcopal church right next to Tiger Stadium and the theaters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is the decline of the church, is what you're saying, is what you're alluding to, or?
Well, it's interesting because the African American church is thriving in Detroit. So it's the decline of the Episcopal Anglican church. And in fact, I think the Episcopal church today is like 30% African American. Even the Anglican church, that they've tried to fill their ranks by. So if you went to the Episcopal or Anglican church in Detroit, it'd probably be like, I don't know, maybe even like 50% African American. And African Americans are actually one of your strongest Christian measures. I think like half of Detroit goes to church on Sunday. So the church you might not, consider them, so to say, your brothers in Christ, or have a different way of looking at that. But the
Oh,
church,
because they're black?
well, they're African, they're Baptist, or they have a different understanding of Christianity. But the Episcopal and
Oh,
the Anglican churches have had declines. They've tried to fill their huge decline in numbers through recruiting African Americans. But the African American churches in Detroit are prospering. There's like mega churches that pack with like 5,000-10,000 people every Sunday. And the voting bloc in Detroit is actually very religious in terms of probably where you're at. If I think statistics said that as much as 50% of Detroiters go to church on Sunday.
yeah. Well, the church is declining in Canada, but it's kind of interesting that a lot of blacks go to church and are very religious. I wonder how it has something to do with their third world conditions. You see a lot of third world countries; they're very religious and they're very community oriented, as opposed to like first world countries who are more individualistic and don't necessarily need the church for their social life.
Yeah, in my neighborhood also, that's upper middle class and largely African American, church attendance is also extremely high. So, I mean, I've heard from different more Hindus, they say atheism is a unique disease of the West, that African Americans don't suffer the disease of atheism in the same way that the white man does.
Yeah, atheism is kind of a interesting phenomenon. It springs off of this Enlightenment thought that we're progressing, and atheism, one of the critiques they have of religion is it's old, bigoted, and it's too old fashioned. We need something new. I've actually talked to like secular people who still believe in God, but they don't necessarily subscribe to religion because they view it as it leads to wars, conflicts between tribes, I guess, and it doesn't necessarily fit in their secular worldview of what the global liberal establishment wants for a one world government.
I don't know that much about Canada. Hypatia's asking, what denomination are most Canadians?
They're mostly Protestant, but
And
Quebec is Quebec. Quebec is Catholic.
Yeah, I mean, Quebec was settled by Catholics, but do they have like Anglicans where they have a national church under the Queen?
In some places, yes, but it's mostly like the Salvation Army. That's basically one of the main churches. There's a lot of churches. I'd say there is some Anglican, but it's a lot. I'd say the evangelicals also up there as well too. I wouldn't say that maybe like 20% of the Christian population.
Well, Anglican and Episcopalian, I mean, people mention like Jewish dual loyalty. You actually, I believe you have to take an oath to the Queen of England. And the Episcopals may have broken off, and the Episcopals will break off of the Anglican Church, and up to like 1850 or whatever, they had to take an oath. But if you're Anglican today, you have to take an oath to a foreign leader. So if you have Anglicans in Canada, that means they have an oath to the Queen of England.
Yeah, and also there's a lot of people that believe that the Jews are the chosen people and that we must save Israel for biblical reasons.
Well, I'd assume that's probably the most popular form of Christianity. I mean, that's why you have Justin Trudeau as prime minister, and that's probably at least a plurality, if not the majority, of Canadian Christians. I mean, because I know Canada is a huge supporter of Israel. I mean, Justin Trudeau is he basically does everything Israel wants, right?
Well, the conservatives do too, right? They're not really that much better. It's just two sides of a same coin, Like Stephen Harper actually in 2014, you can look this up, he made it illegal to criticize the state of Israel for their policies that they have with Canada. Basically, Canada is America's bitch when it comes to foreign policy. So wherever America goes, Canada goes. And so we're basically in the same mess that you are, except our army's really lackluster as opposed to the American one.
So what's your party again? Your Canadian Nationalist Party? That's
yes.
And what type of percentage do they have of the parliament?
We're just getting registered. We're close to getting registered.
You don't have any seats at all?
No, we need signatures to become a party, and then we'll be in the election.
Is it a secular party or is it a Christian party?
Christian party.
Protestant or Catholic?
I would say it's both, because
You're-
Canada's very diverse. But Canada's is kind of, it's divisive in that way, in that, you know, Quebec is very Catholic, and they didn't secularize until the 60s. You see the kind of the effect that it has is Quebec is not as degenerate as the secular Anglo-Canadian world. But I would say it's favorable to both.
But I mean, it's possible that the party's not going to go anywhere. I mean, is there poll data that gives any hope to the party doing well?
Well, we're close to getting registered, so we need 30 more signatures. So if anybody's watching, make sure you hand in your sign and hand in your signatures so we can be on the ballot for the 2019 election.
We like 30. I mean, what's your part of we? Are you just a volunteer? Or do you have official position?
I've done some work for the party. Yes, I've gone door to door, and I've advocated for their policies. Yes.
But you're not going to be one of the candidates or on one of their lists.
It's hard to say. Once we start announcing candidates, the media is going to be after us. So we kind of have to be careful on what we announce, and what basically all we can say right now is we're almost registered. And so, but once we start announcing candidates, the media is going to be all over us. There's actually a Canadian anti-hate group is actually targeting us because of our policies on immigration, and they want to basically dox all 250 members once we get registered as a party. So they're trying to basically gaslight us into being into the ballot in 2019. So we face different challenges than other parties, because
people are scared of being doxxed. I mean, you're going to have people that are proud to show their name and faces if they're going to be a legitimate political party and represent a decent percentage of Canadians.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, we're not going to win the election, but the thing is, we're a grassroots movement, so we want to.
Well, it's parliamentary. You're saying that.
Yeah, another thing of our platform too is we want a domestic monarchy. So we want to split off from the Commonwealth and have our own domestic monarchy. So that's part of it, is also splitting Western Canada from Ontario and Quebec.
So, I mean, you want to
There's a lot of talk about Alberta separatism. What?
You want a new monarchy, or you want to strengthen the power of the Queen?
New monarchy.
And who would the new monarchy come from? Is there a certain royal house that already exists, or just in theory that an elected official would become royalty?
Just the elected official will become royalty. I would say, yeah, it would have to be based upon merit, and I think that's what we value. And so basically have to be a really competent person that would be in charge of this monarchy.
But it'd be a monarchy that a person would get there through merit, but then it would become lineage based, where their children would become king after them.
Kind of like that, yes. I think we're kind of frustrated because the Queen has the power to overrule the Prime Minister right now, and she has failed to do that. And Justin Trudeau is basically could be charged for treason, but she hasn't done anything. So that's part of our platform, is to break away from the Queen, because obviously it is not serving Canadian interests. So that's why we advocate for a new monarchy.
Is there a threshold to get into a parliament, or just once, if you have enough votes for one seat, you could have one seat, or do you need a certain threshold?
Like you just get one seat. Like you can win a riding, and then basically and then have your voice heard in Parliament, and then it'll actually really shock the political system. Actually, there's some stories about our party. If you don't mind me screen sharing.
Yeah,
I'm just gonna find them first, and I'll screen share them.
Okay, let me know when you got it.
Okay.
Yeah, 'cause I largely wanted to talk about the Democratic debates here in America, but if you want to show some of that, that's fine. And if people are, I mean, I was noticing that myself and people outside, where none of the candidates are really interesting. So the outside in Detroit, you had people that were interested in the Green New Deal or reparations. None of the candidates really had a huge crowd. Like Marianne Williamson, I guess, is some sort of guru that had a little bit of a following. But it seemed more ideas, that the people outside were behind ideas and were willing to get behind any candidate that backs certain ideas. Like the Green New Deal was probably the biggest group demonstrating outside. But even tomorrow, I don't think there's going to be like a huge Biden constituency, even though Biden is overwhelmingly winning in the polls. Like, I don't picture hundreds of people outside cheering for Biden. I think they just want someone who's going to win and defeat Trump, let alone like an idea where you're talking about installing a monarchy where anybody could become so popular. And, even think like Trump that rose to be relatively popular. I don't think Republicans or Democrats, there might be a handful would be interested in like some kind of Kushner, Ivanka, royalty. And there might be a little bit of a push in America. Like there is a handful of people, maybe Trump himself, who's like, like enough with elections. Let's just create a monarchy, and Ivanka and Jared will rule forever.
Mm-hmm. Can you see my screen?
Now I got to click on you, so go ahead.
Okay, so the title here, so Bernie takes a call from leader of far-right Canadian Nationalist Party, but says there'll be no more talks. So basically, we have infiltrated the mainstream, but they're actively trying to silence us. And another thing, he also came out, our leader Travis Patron came out with a video about the globalists and their nefarious ways on having no loyalty to one country, and they do business everywhere they go. And also about how their nefarious politics divide and conquer our parties, and while they laugh to the bank pretty much and buy out all their politicians. So the media has really gone hard on censoring us and trying to dox us, because they're very biased in how they assess which is good and which is bad politics. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to move the Overton window of what is more acceptable narrative.
Yeah, I was saying, if they think they could oust you by doxing you, that means that you're a pretty small party. I mean, if you think like you don't think that there's 5-10% of the Canadian people that are going to back the idea, then like doxing wouldn't be that big of a deal. You think like you may not even get one seat in Parliament, that they could scare you out by doxing you. It's like, not only are you going to lose, you're not going to get a single representative. They think just a handful of people that might support your idea, they'll be able to like ruin your life, so you'll never be able to rise again or something like that.
Well, it's pretty dire here in Canada already, so we don't really have anything to lose. But also there is the Canadian law. You can't really charge people for their political views. Like there's a lot of this hate speech going on, and you can't necessarily, we still have free speech in Canada. It's not as great. It's not as in stone as like in America with the Constitution, but there's I'm sure there's CSIS watching this right now, or people trying to monitor us, but they can't even get rid of like ISIS terrorists, so we're not necessarily afraid of the deep state doxing us and reporting us. I guess there is some people that do take that into consideration, but you can still remain private under the Canadian Code. Like your information shouldn't be public if for Elections Canada to be registered for a party. And Elections Canada is betraying this law, so we're looking at possibly suing Elections Canada if they release this information out to the public. So I think that's something that is a good non-violent way of kind of accelerating the decline of democracy and kind of exposing people what it really is. So even if we don't necessarily get elected or get a seat, we are accelerating the decline of the democracy, which I think would be better. It'd be better if it happens sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, you just look at what happened in Detroit, where, I mean, most people still seem interested in the democracy and the issues. It's just the divide has gotten bigger. But the push for the progressive agenda has gotten stronger. That for socialism or these huge social programs versus the Republican side. So on this side, as I said, the structural advantage where it's a reasonable chance that a Democrat could come in and the Democrats could sweep the presidency, the House, and the Senate, and push the agenda of America back towards like an Obama, furthering in the Obama direction. I don't know the logistics in Canada like that, but I mean, there's the part of people that are just unhappy with the system. In what are they going to do about it? So that they could leave in the same way that President Trump is, telling the people, if you don't like it, leave. But if in reality, if the Democrats swept the elections in 2020, that same thing could push back on the Republicans, where if they don't like it, they could leave.
Right. Do you see the benefit of grassroots movements and getting publicity from the media? Like that's probably the best thing you could do as a young party, that people actually, instead of like, you want them to like you, but if they don't like you, at least they should fear you. And I think that's probably like a good goal, especially in politics, is at least if people don't like you, they should fear you.
Well, I guess, I mean, if they're trying to ruin you, that means they fear you, because I mean, if you were just irrelevant, they wouldn't need to even attempt to like dox or ruin you. Yeah. And if it's the push, you say that your general Canadians not thinking of the dangers of there's certain economic or social issues, but they're not really thinking about voting along like demographic or racial lines that the European based Canadians or Americans would have to vote as a racial bloc. They're still thinking about it as an issue by issue basis or a collection of issues. And the people of European heritage in America and Canada are enough divided, because obviously Europe is a largely socialist bloc. So, the whole concept of capitalism pushing in America for the European, that's very unclear. That's, I was mentioning my European ancestor, my European Jewish ancestors were proud socialists, but they were German socialists. And, Germany was a socialist country. Germany largely till today is a socialist country. So, the whole the socialist capitalist debate is an internal debate within Europeans. And that's what you saw with the Bernie Sanders. I think the African Americans seem less on board with the progressive agenda than the white liberals. So, like if you look at the Bernie supporters.
Mm-hmm. Well, white liberals have always used the blacks as a pawn for political points. Like they never actually cared about them; they just used them for.
Well, that's unclear. I mean, that may be the case for some, but the coalition for the two-party system. So Canada has a parliamentary system, as opposed to the U.S., which has a two-party system, and will force the coalition upon people that you will lead to different dynamics than in the parliamentary system. And you think like Israel has a threshold, I think, of like 4 seats now. So that like the 3.5%, which means 4 seats in the parliament. So it's not like Canada where you could just get 1 seat in the parliament. And it's unclear whether the push for Canada to become racially aware, and then obviously if you're already pushing balkanization, you don't think even among your European background people that the French Canadians and the Anglo Canadians, there's no way that they're going to combine forces for a pan-European Canadian unity to fight.
Oh yeah,
demographic change, because.
Yeah. Well, I think the Anglos and the French really hate each other.
Yeah, but so there's almost no chance that you're going to have some sort of agreement between the Anglo and French.
If my party gets into power, we would be an advocate for Quebec separatism. Like, you don't necessarily need the federal government, but it does help to have the federal government on your side to advocate for separatism. And this is something, I guess, that has waned away a little bit in Quebec because a lot of the younger generation is frustrated about separation talks from their parents, so they kind of go into the Confederate stance, which is kind of sad because Quebec still has a way superior culture than the rest of Anglo Canada. And but if you have a Anglo representative that understands your plight, that does definitely help with the separation talks, and maybe gives the Quebecois people a more national consciousness of their own territory.
Yeah,
There's actually the French Empire used to like spread all the way down to Louisiana and like part of like Western Canada too.
Yeah, they were separate. I mean, the history of it. I mean, the Jews were involved in Quebec because Quebec, you had to be Catholic, and they didn't allow Jews there. And the Jews who had been in the American colonies teamed up with the Anglos, and there were actually I forget the names, but they're actually military leaders that were Jews that were part of the coalition that defeated the Quebec Empire.
They also voted against Quebec separatism as well. It was the Anglos, the Jews, and the immigrants that swayed the vote. It was 51 no, 49 yes for separatism. So a lot of Quebecers blame a lot of the Jews and the Anglos and the immigrants in Montreal.
Yeah, which makes sense that if you just look at people's best interest, that if you assume people are rational actors and going to act according to their best interest, that it's the question is it within the larger European background people in America and Canada to act as a block for their best interest, or are they better off accepting the multicultural further demographic decline and using their block to push for a certain type system, if it's socialist or capitalist? And like the idea of Trump, who might whistle or something at the demographic change, it's unclear because he never outright mentions demographic change, or that's what he's talking about. And he seems pretty clear that Trump is on board with multiculturalism, increased demographic change. He just wants it done in a way that preserves what he considers the characteristics of America. And Trudeau probably has a similar type view. So your average Canadian, Kevin Michael Grace and his mentioning people getting priced out of their towns, the increase of real estate prices in cities where your average Canadian can't afford the competition on the higher end and the lower end, where you have high wage immigrants coming in that could afford to buy up the better real estate that your native born Canadians can't. And then you have low wage immigrants coming in, driving down wages that are hitting your native Canadians on a two-pronged way, that they're losing their real estate. They can't afford to hold on to their historic real estate because prices are going up, and there's new immigrants that are buying them out, and their wages keep going down because the pressure on wages is to go down because of immigrants coming in that will work for less money. And there's multiple ways to look at fixing that problem. And if you diagnose the problem is immigration, the problem is demographic change. And if you just got rid of immigration, that would end the demographic change and you would be able to solve that problem. It's unclear that your average person of European descent in America or Canadian is diagnosing the problem like that. So certainly, like you're saying, like, well, why is there such a push to destroy and dox and ruin these parties that are nativist? That there's certainly a fear among the immigrant multicultural base that if people like you's voice gets amplified too much, that maybe tens of millions or tens of percent of the people of European heritage in America or Canada are going to start waking up and trying to change this change. Or there's the push to say, like, no, I don't think that's they're not going whites, so to say, European background people are not going to vote as a racial bloc. They're going to vote on issues, and they'll continue to be divided.
Yeah, but it's like what you mentioned about immigration. Everybody should see that, and they should vote on a block just based on those issues.
Yeah, but there's too
Not
much.
saying be one issue voter, but like say like they should have that in their consciousness when they make decisions on who to vote for.
Yeah, but so certainly the American system where you only have two parties, you can't really afford to be a one-issue voter, and there's so many other things like, like abortion, or if you look at the things where people are one-issue voters on, you probably have more like one-issue voters on abortion than you do on immigration. Or there might be a correlation that a lot of the people who are against abortion are also against immigration. And economic things is that people of European heritage, to be capitalistic versus socialist, there's not necessarily any reason why you would assume that a European heritage person would be one or the other of those, and that they're going to become a one-issue voter on immigration, demographic change, as opposed to all the other series of issues. So maybe in Canada, where you have a parliamentary system, and if only a few percent of people consider that an issue to vote on, that could sway at least a political party like yours to rise and get a few seats of parliament and have a little voice that is aired constantly. In America, the coalition has to be built, and that part of the coalition is relatively small. Even the Trump base of people, like the Build the Wall type base, is relatively small to the larger Trump coalition. The larger Trump coalition, and this is all polled. I'm not so steeped in Canadian polling data.
Are you saying that we need to have lobbyists on our side?
Well, I'm just talking about analytics. But aside for the lobbyist, I mean, the lobbyist may or may not help you. I mean, certainly lobbyists could be a benefit to you. But no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just talking about the analytics and saying, if you're not capable of doing the analytics yourself or having the polling data, and you need a lobbyist in order to help you do that. But no, you could probably, are there organizations like Pew and Gallup that do large polling data across Canada?
Yeah, they just don't do it as often. And a lot of it is kind of they were banking on they're parroting the same narrative that Hillary Clinton had a 97% chance of winning the 2016 presidential election, as opposed to Trump.
So I'm not just talking about polling like political candidates or who supports who, but polling on issues where you could for a Republican American politics, you could poll the larger electorate on the issues and look at a coalition based on a candidate who is on the right side of certain issues, and building a coalition of the people that will back the candidate because they're one issue voters, and that candidate is supporting the issue they care about. And it's saying, as of what's known, if you're basically a one issue party where your issue is demographic change and immigration, that you might know the polling data of what percent. So if you're in America or something like that, polling data might only show like 3 to 10% of America, and even less, like people that are one issue voters on immigration and demographic change is going to be definitely in the single digits, possibly in the low single digits. As where something like abortion, you might have a substantially higher amount of people that are one issue voters, or even like Israel, or low taxes. That and it could also be the type issue you're talking about, that it's going to be too late by the time that that is a high priority issue to large amounts of people. It might be relatively too late, just like in America, demographically, where you would need now like 60-70% of whites to be concerned enough about this in order to sway an election. But knowing that whites are generally like 50-50 Democrat, Republican. So just swaying a few percentage of whites to switch over to Republican because that's the party that addresses demographic change concerns is proving to be extremely difficult for, the Republicans or for the people who are concerned about demographic change.
Do you know anything about Canadian banking?
No, almost none. Like I live right next to Windsor here in Detroit. I haven't been to Windsor in years. As a kid, my parents, we used to go to Windsor occasionally to like eat. Maybe I've been to Windsor like 10 times, maybe even 20 times, but I haven't been to Windsor in like the last 15 years. I occasionally bump into people from Canada just over, even today, I think on my YouTube, some of the people I spoke to were there from Canada, but no, I know almost nothing about it.
So Canada, the Canadian bank is the only bank out of the G8 countries that are actually is a publicly owned bank. It is not a private institution like the Federal Reserve that does fractional reserve banking. It is actually owned by the people. So I don't know if you can see my screen, but one of our—
I'll click on back on you.
Okay. So one of the policies here is to restore the Bank of Canada for the purpose outlined in the Bank Act of 1938. So that was before we bought private bonds. Another thing they also want to do is withdraw themselves from organization such as the Banking International Settlements and basically excuse all of the debts that occurred from that. And so Canada it's a resource-rich country, so there's no really rhyme reason for us to be in debt, because we don't really have much of a— we export a lot as opposed to consume a lot, so there's no reason for us to be in that debt. So it's the only reason why is because there's a lot of bonds that are tied up in our bank that their International Monetary Fund has pumped in there for globalist cause. And also, there's a lot of projects that have been stalled as well too. There's been premiers from Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba that actually written to Justin Trudeau about the potential for a Western separatist movement because the economics doesn't make any sense for the provinces to stay united in one confederation of Canada. So that's another hot button issue as well too. And so also repeal Bill C-69 and C-48. This is the carbon tax, basically. So a lot of that is hurting the Canadian consumer as opposed to helping the environment. We are looking for different ways. I guess hemp is one way, of fuelless farm is one way. That's kind of out of the political system, but this is within the political system. Is that just get this out because we don't have an actual alternative energy source that can actually fuel the economy. So we want to repeal this so it would put more money in the Canadians' pocket and the middle class won't erode. So I think that's a very civic nationalist kind of thing. Like even if you're a high wage immigrant, I think this would also appeal to you as well. So basically establish a labor. This is kind of actually I've said this to my leaders. We should have a labor force to deal with unemployment. So basically a jobs program for anybody who can't find jobs. As well, another thing we also stand for is that if you want to vote in a democracy, you should at least serve in the military or civil service for at least 1 year. So at least you have some skin in the game, as opposed to any Joe Schmo with an ID that can vote. So it raises the standards, at least. And then here's our immigration. So we want to reinstate the Immigration Act of 1952. So that means anybody of Anglophone, well, not native, because natives are just, they're indigenous to North American continent, but anybody from Anglophone, Francophone, or any European can come in of good, outstanding character. We also want to increase the citizens. We want to increase the barrier of entry, because right now there's a lot of loopholes that immigrants are taking advantage of with the immigration system. So we want to increase the barriers of entry so that nobody can slip through the cracks, or at least few people. And actually, we're the only party in Canada that actually advocates for deportation of illegal immigrants. No other party is doing that right now in Canada, even Bernier's party, the People Party of Canada. Also repeal the Multicultural Act of 1988. And also anti-Islamophobia, so you should be able to be freely criticize any religion as you like. And also that Canada is not a mixture of cultures, but it's an Anglophone Francophone stock. So that's the thing that actually Pierre Trudeau enacted this. No, it was Mulroney, yeah. Ben Mulroney? Yeah, Ben Mulroney, he put this in act in 1988, but it was started in Pierre Trudeau in 1972. So the Trudeaus have a history of really showing displeasure to Canadian patriotism. So it's no shock that Trudeau is enacting the globalist plan, because he has a lot of ties to George Soros and globalists, so he has no really interest in serving the common people. You can argue for the same for Donald Trump. And then this is our statement here. So it's been made clear to us Canadians that the establishment of those elected into power within the constituency in which we now stand no longer represent our interests. From British shores at the center of the Union Jack, a cross was planted deep in the fertile soil on this fair land, and in this ensign as adheres to promise placed upon the covenant of many nations, not only laid bedrock principles of our loyalty and devotion to each other from the commonwealth in which we were born, but also in the very cornerstone which has and always will be a nation under God. This is our birthright, and this is the roots in which the tree of our covenant was planted. To reject this is ensure our own destruction, not only as a nation, but as a civilization. Therefore we stand, we shall be no room for ensigns born from the ideologies of the crescent moons, hammers, and sickles. No twisted rainbows within the educational system and political offices of our nation. No quarter shall be given to the hand of usury that will never feed our people, but can only move them towards inevitable starvation. Equal opportunity and equality of income are as light and darkness, and egalitarianism can only make us all equal as slaves. A kingdom divided against itself cannot stand. We are putting patriotism back into Parliament, for it has never, nor will it ever be, a goal within the Canadian Nationalist Party to merge and bow to contemporary corruption, which has placed our nation on the auction block for a bidding of tyrants, both foreign and domestic. And then there's we will never coalesce with such a system, but by the will of God and the glory by him, we shall replace it. You could pretty much say Allah Akbar, but I don't know. Same Abrahamic roots, but anyway. So what do you think about that, Doooovid?
Yeah, I mean, it's not my ideology. I mean, I could understand that there's an element in Canada that feels like that. If yeah, I've been seeing the polling data to look, the conglomeration of issues and what people care about those issues, or the likelihood of people that care about those issues would sign up for all those issues, and like kind of like the Ed and the Fed, and at the same time, if you're likely to have any immigrants or any minorities that are likely to support that party, it would be unlikely that you might get to almost zero support from minorities for that party. And then when you have a party that doesn't have any minorities, you're gonna have to look, why would European-based people back that party, and then the different conglomeration of issues. of that. Does it make sense that there be enough people from European background that would sign up for that conglomeration of various issues? I haven't seen the polling data here in America. Unlikely. But you don't have any candidates that are popularly running on a whole bill of issues like that. Where President Trump, people might think that he's pushing something like that, but clearly that's not what he says, and he rejects that's what he's saying. As opposed to a party that openly has that part of their platform. But a parliamentary system, it's like in Europe. Yeah, I mean, in Europe, there's multiple countries where parties like that are getting a sizable chunk of the platform. I mean, I don't know. I mean, because I was trying to keep the conversation more focused.
Well, what do you think about Claire being Chinese and being anti-immigrant? What do you think about Claire being a Chinese immigrant and being anti-immigration?
Well, that's unclear. I mean, that's just possibly like her persona that she talks about on issues of. I mean, you have in America, certainly your minorities that are economically on the higher end of education and economic output tend to still be Democratic due to just being minority, and because of issues like you're including in your party, like anti-immigration, anti-multiculturalism, a country that benefits people from European descent. And so you might have an occasional person that will.
But wouldn't it be a benefit to the assimilated immigrants? But wouldn't it be a benefit to the assimilated immigrants to prefer a more nationalist platform as opposed to a globalist one? Or a multicultural one, I guess?
No, I mean, probably not, because, I mean, the multicultural...
Sorry, I can't hear you, David.
Probably not, because the agenda seems to be benefiting immigrants. And I mean, even in Canada, that the continual increase in immigrants, the allowance of, it's like Claire, if she wanted her whole family, extended family. You might have a few people that are able to fully assimilate into, so to say, European cultural. Maybe they marry a European, and even though their kids are only half European, but they raise their kid in that culture. But it's probably going to be the vast minority of people. And I haven't seen the polling data in Canada, but certainly in America, the polling data is very clear that almost all minorities are on the Democratic side. And you might have like Trump or something that was able to get a certain amount of Hindus or Indians over to his side for larger international issues like Pakistan versus India. And because Trump has clearly said that he's not backing ideas like that he is a multicultural Republican. No, it just doesn't make sense. Like why would a minority back a party like that? If you're saying like we don't need the backing of minorities,
well,
your goal is
I've actually had immigrants that are more susceptible to my message as opposed to white people. I found it anyway.
Yeah, but they might.
When I did my own polling anyway, I found that more immigrants were actually more, especially like the Islamic ones, the Islamic conservative ones.
Well, possibly because the
Islamic conservative ones, like even like I've ran into like black people that signed my petition as well, like black conservatives have signed my petition. So like I would say like our platform is pretty like civic nationalist in a sense that we recognize that having majority population for the immigrants to assimilate to is actually the fundamental of actually having a nation as opposed to mixing everybody up, which you want to do.
We're saying that the character that they're going to assimilate to is European, and certainly because you're not in Europe, you're in North America. That they're moving to North America if they wanted to assimilate into European heritage culture, and it's not even Europe. You're talking about largely a European colonial or settlement area. The polling data in America is very clear. I haven't looked at the Canadian. You do have elements of Jewish Republicans, Chinese Republicans, Black Republicans, but relatively they're very small. And in America, the Republican Party does not have a platform like the Republican Party is generally also subscribing to this concept of nation of immigrants, and I'm sure like Justin Trudeau and the dividing line of Europeans in Canada that consider preserving the European character heritage of Canada. I don't even know the polling data on that, but I mean, here in America, if you looked at the people of European heritage in America that are concerned about the change in status of demographic change, it's not that large. I'm saying that like polling data were over 50% of so to say whites recently were polled saying that they thought it wouldn't be good for America if America became majority non-white, so to say, whatever that white term means. But in terms of making that a political issue, there hasn't been strong polling data that the majority of Americans think like that, and I doubt it's like that in Canada, where your average Canadian would think along those terms enough to vote along those lines.
Well, in Quebec, nationalism is mainstream because it's a lot of the culture is geared towards
culture means more language. I mean, if culture and extent
culture and language, and they weren't influenced by secular Anglo thought, I guess, because when you speak a different language, you naturally think differently.
Yeah, I think
so they don't necessarily have the
part of culture is probably
presupposition.
Contemporary, the most important part of culture is probably
these
language.
Issues.
So the speaking French versus English is a huge difference. And when people consider culture, even in America, like the culture, as long as immigrants learn English, and relatively immigrants, besides for possibly Hispanic or different immigrants that come to America are largely successful at learning the English language. Mm-hmm. With an ethnic characteristic. So if you want to say English is important versus ethnicity is important, and then also our non-English Europeans more successful at learning the English language than non-European immigrants. I'm not sure if that's the case. You're saying like Russian-speaking immigrants are going to be more successful at, because America has a sizable chunk of.
Sorry, you're cutting out a lot.
Yeah,
I'm getting like bits and pieces of what you're saying, but it's actually some new things. My party also wants to add a hyperloop, so build like a transnational hyperloop for public transportations, which extends to Mexico. That's kind of cool. So were you still talking about immigration? Because you cut out in and out a lot.
Yeah, I'm not sure if maybe it's your connection, not mine, because I'm
maybe.
I'm looking back on the feed. Okay, I mean, do you have anything you want to chime in? I want to switch this back to talking about the American politics and specifically the Democratic side of the elections, because that's what's happening in the news right now. There's nothing really happening on the Republican side. I mean, when's your elections coming up?
In October.
Oh, so that's coming up relatively soon.
Yeah. I guess there's the People's Party of Canada that has been famous. Bernier wants to build a wall in the Quebec border to stop asylum seekers that land in the USA. So that's one of the things I guess he's advocating for, is to stop the asylum seekers going through Roxanne Road. Because there's basically a third country agreement, right? Once a refugee lands in a first world country that's not war torn, you're not allowed to go to another first world country. You're supposed to stay where you are. You're not supposed to be in the States and then go up to Canada because Trudeau said that he made a tweet that those that are fleeing persecution can come here, even if you're illegal, even if you want to throw shit on the walls in hotels and basically devalue the property of the hotel that they're staying in. Sure, why not? That's what we're all about. We're all about diversity and acceptance here, okay?
Here in Michigan, our biggest problem is largely from Europeans for illegal immigration, because I mean we're a long way from Mexico, and I mean you have a certain amount. Michigan's more like a asylum state, so refugees, if they could get here to Detroit, but in terms of the people who cross over illegally from Canada over the lake are mostly from Eastern Europe. If you look at your Department of Homeland Security data.
So Eastern Europeans are flooding your country.
Well, in Michigan, where I'm at, saying, I mean, I'm a long way from Mexico. I'm thousands of miles north of Mexico. I mean, you do have a certain amount of Hispanics that make it all the way up here, but we're bordered with Canada, and it's not a huge amount, but there's a sizable amount of people that illegally cross over from Canada to America, and the majority of the people that cross illegally from Canada to Michigan, to Canada to America, the Michigan border, are Eastern Europeans, and I don't know how they get to Canada, and that they would decide to try to get to America through, taking a boat over Lake Erie or something like that to come to, or to get to Michigan. But that happens to be that's the case of migration flows, that you have Eastern Europeans that come illegally, or however they get to Canada, and then they try to legally cross the border from Canada to America and Michigan.
Are they actually refugees though? Are you talking about like people in Bulgaria or like in the poor parts of Europe? Or are you talking about people from Poland?
Could be Poland, Russia, maybe Bulgaria. These wouldn't be refugees. These would be just illegal immigrants, as opposed
like,
to.
Are they traveling? Are you sure they're not just travelers or that overstayed their visit? Like, where's your data? Where's your sources?
It's the Homeland Security data for Michigan of who are the illegal immigrants in Michigan. So I'm saying we border with Canada here, and the people, I mean, they're not Arabs or whatever. I don't know the likelihood of if it's easier for an Eastern European to illegally get into Canada than, but I mean, no, I mean, we have refugees here in Michigan, but they don't come through the Canadian border. They apply from the Middle East to get through to come to America, and then they might come to Michigan. But the people who would illegally be crossing the border from Canada into America at Michigan are almost all European. I mean, presumably that makes sense. That they're not They're not trying to claim refugee status. They're just whatever reason, people that have decided to illegally enter. And it's not a huge number. The amount of illegal immigrants that cross the American border from Canada is not a huge amount. But it is a note that, I mean, you could look up. I mean, it's past midnight. I don't do like a book report here, but you could look up the Homeland Security data for Michigan.
Yeah, I could do that.
I don't want to do that right now, but I want more interested in talking. So, did you have anything else you wanted to add, or do you have any comment on the Democratic primary debates?
I like Tulsi Gabbard. I like her because she has experience. She's actually has experience as a war veteran, and she knows what it's like to actually go to war, as opposed to these hucksters who, like Joel and Bolton, who just who don't necessarily consider the consequence of their orders that they pass out. So same with Trump. So I think she would actually be if we actually live in a meritocracy, she would actually be pretty high up there, and she should be actually in charge of our military personnel. So I would like to see her in some sort of, if she doesn't get president, like maybe some sort of foreign policy position where she is in control of what happens in the Middle East.
Yeah, she's going to be there tomorrow night. It should be interesting. Tomorrow night will probably be more interesting than tonight was. Is anything else you wanted to add? Maybe I'll monologue a few minutes or see if anyone else that knows more about American politics wants to come on.
Bernie Sanders. Was it Bernie Sanders? Wasn't he affiliated with the Koch party? Like, didn't he say that immigration is a Koch party conspiracy to drive down the wages of the worker. Remember him saying that one? Yeah. Like you said, it was a Koch brother conspiracy to drive down the wage. Because Democrats used to be, like Joe Biden used to talk about building a wall, and Obama, even like in 2009, talked about building a wall. But now they see the benefit of all this, all these free voters coming in, so now they're all pro-immigration.
You have to look at his platform. Certainly when Bernie Sanders mentions like millionaires and billionaires in a negative way, he almost always mentions the Koch brothers, as opposed to maybe in alt-right circles, they more mention Jewish billionaires. Bernie Sanders almost he'll mention Walmart and the Koch brothers, and immigration might be a factor in that, what's affecting the American worker. But I mean, generally, Bernie Sanders is pro-immigration, but not for wage. Like Bernie Sanders obviously has a $15 minimum wage platform, and doesn't want immigration as a way to drive wages down. So in that way, it could be a difference between Republicans or whatever that don't mind wages from big business Republicans. The Koch brothers are generally sponsors of the Republican Party, and Walmart also generally sponsors the Republican Party. However, they also union busters and might use large amounts of immigrants or outsourcing their factories and businesses to different countries. I haven't heard Bernie Sanders so much mention the Koch brothers. I think their power has slightly declined since 2016. So in 2016, it was the Koch brothers. Like every other time Bernie Sanders spoke, it was the Koch brothers. I don't think he mentioned the Koch brothers tonight or in his more recent interviews. Koch brothers obviously are a big coal family. I know there's a lot of coal in Canada. I'm not sure, like the Seagrams, the Bronfman, who started with the beer, the Seagrams beer and alcohol as distillers. Most of the wealth of the Bronfman family was from that money that later they invested in natural resources like gas, oil, and coal. So I don't know how big a deal coal is, or if your wealthy coal barons. If you even have those in Canada, you have a more social government where your resources aren't controlled by families like the Koch brothers that dominate the coal business. Pew also,
or Nestle that controls the water source of all the lakes around Flint, Michigan.
Pew survey is the Pew family is also a big coal family, and so the Democratic debates, like almost all the agreement, like environmental change, moving towards a green economy, clean energy type thing, the oil, gas. Trump isn't really such an oil and gas guy. Like Rex Tillerson, he fell out with Rex Tillerson from ExxonMobil, possibly due to problems with Jared Kushner. So the push from Kushner, who might be like pro Saudi Arabia, less so. It's unclear. I haven't heard too much about the role of oil and gas here in America. We're now exporting. We've been able to vastly increase deregulation. So I assume the Koch brothers are probably doing pretty well. I'm not sure about their lobbying effort. There hasn't really been that much an effort to demonize them this election yet.
Has anybody talk about the Paris Climate Accord in the Democratic Party?
I don't think it was mentioned tonight, but yeah, I think almost everyone on the Democratic side has criticized Trump for doing that. There was a little talk, possibly from your more mainstream, non-progressive Democrats, about the steel industry or tariffs. Here in Metro Detroit, the auto industry tends to be pro-environmental, within reason. Like they don't want so much regulation, but out of a voluntary effort, there's quite a push within the auto industry to become more environmentally friendly, possibly due to economic reasons or just overwhelming
They
scientists.
should go back to hemp. They should go back to making cars out of hemp. I like that one politician that talked about making hemp straws.
Yeah, that first.
What's his name?
I don't even remember his name. I'd
Oh.
have to check the video. I mean, he was someone who was running for president that didn't make the debates, and I don't even know if he's going to be on any of the ballots or whatever. I have to check his name a second time and Google him. But yeah, that was interesting that his main issue, he was talking about plastics and going back to hemp to making plastics, because hemp causes much less. I mean, generally plastics are an oil derivative. That most of the plastics that we use are a derivative of oil products, and so going back to hemp derivatives for plastics might be less harmful to the environment. That was interesting that man mentioned that as his main issue.
And another thing too, did you know it was actually in the 17th century, it was actually illegal not to grow hemp in America, and the Constitution was actually made out of hemp paper. Did you know that?
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the nicotine and tobacco. I mean, that was one of the main cash crops of America was hemp.
Mm-hmm.
That was before the oil boom.
And it was made for other things too, like clothing, building houses. Like, now it's everyone has gone onto wood, which is actually a lot less efficient. Like hemp lasts a lot longer, and wood it dries out quicker, and as well it takes longer to grow trees back, so it's not as efficient. So if you had hemp, you wouldn't have this like environmental catastrophe that you have right now with cutting of trees, even though a lot of companies are cognizant of it. But I think they're running against the grain with being dependent upon wood for building houses and whatnot.
Even it's the nature of the corruption in politics or political power, and even like silently, you're talking like the oil, gas, coal businesses that have a lot of power within the lobbying industry, though they may not be popular and people might not think about it often, but they have huge amounts of power in politics due to important resources or controlling infrastructure, where good ideas could just be pushed on the wayside, or even bad ideas could be promoted through the nature of corruption in politics.
So what do we do? I guess we have no really choice but to be involved in this system if they're going to keep doing what they're doing, right?
It's unfortunate because it's hard to just have good ideas and move forward on them, because the nature of the political system is like you say, you have to win elections and you have to get large amounts of people to vote for you, and there's certain issues that people care about more than others. So from a political perspective, these ideas you have almost no chance of getting there's a threshold, not like an Overton window, but there's a threshold of public interest to get an issue into the public debates. Like if you watch the debate tonight, there's so many candidates and they only have a minute to speak, and so there's only so many issues, and the issues that get forwarded are the ones that have enough care from the public that they want to hear answers to, like healthcare, education, taxes, student loans, a variety of issues. So something that might be something that, like, yeah, that's a good idea. There's just not enough time and interest to get them forwarded to the political sphere. So if you could just move forward as a person, like, open up your own hemp business or something, but if the gas lobby decides that they don't want you doing that, and through political pressure of political donations and lobbying, that they could control the votes on those type things, and then the smaller people can't get enough public interest to even like, did you know that you're not allowed to do this because the gas lobby has forbidden you from doing it. And so even if you were to say, like, no, I didn't know that, like, that's horrible, that's concerning, and then how would you go about changing it? You'd have to get the issue to have enough public attention to enter like the debates or the political sphere and have candidates adding it to their platform. And it's just like so you had a platform there for your party. How come your platform doesn't have issues like like you're talking about? Because you know what I'm saying? Like, how come you're not adding onto your platform issues like that?
We got a lot of different things. Like we want to install a Bitcoin as a currency, and our platform is more focused on oil and gas, because we're not necessarily a polluter in the atmosphere. But yeah, the jobs program though, on that first page that I showed you, that actually I suggested that to the leader. For anybody who can't find a job, that the government should find a job for them to do, as opposed to just sit around and do nothing all day. So I actually opposed that. I actually proposed that to my leader, and now he's putting that on his platform. So and it's not to say that that it'll be in there, but you can't necessarily put everything in there. You got to put points that pique people's interest, and then get in, and then you can kind of do your own agenda. That's kind of how the nature of politics works. So it's not necessarily like a be all end all thing, like go balls to the wall and spout off everything that you're about. Like, you can still give people tidbits of truth and not necessarily lie to them, and then once you get in, you can basically do whatever you want, because most people are kind of apathetic anyway. So they just want something that is good for them, that pays their bills and feeds their family, and has a happy, prosperous life. They're not really cared about, natural disasters as much as we are. So if you just give them what they want to hear, and then once you get in, that's when you enact your plan. Not necessarily spout off everything that you're all about.
Yeah, I mean, you can never really do everything that you want, but you could do quite a bit, or you could push for a little bit. And if you have divisions of power or methods that slow down change, which most governmental systems do, and you have certain lobbies or certain special interest groups that are going to make it difficult to do what you want in terms of multiple issues that most people don't think about. So certain things like electricity, natural resources aren't things that enter the sphere of debate usually, like climate change, environmentalism. I don't even think that's directly related to like natural resources or the electrical grid or different things that even like the Green New Deal isn't really a thought on. It's a general just like push that society should be moved, and President Obama was able to divert maybe even like $1 trillion, like hundreds of billions of dollars towards like green energy, and making it more expensive and difficult for natural resource companies to operate. So a person could do quite a bit, but on those issues, politics is generally about seizing power and exerting power, and you have to look at the will of the people, and the will of the people is usually on certain major issues, and that's why you have polling data. So Pew, for example, saying that surveys this stuff. I think Gallup was a media family, but Pew is in fact a coal natural gas family, and their foundation that they're measuring this stuff. Are they doing it so for the interest of their families' coal and gas interest? It's possible that that you need to control the politics in a way that but it's unlikely that you'd have a mass movement in one of these countries around one of these issues. Even like immigration, was saying that immigration is generally downstream from the major issues like healthcare, taxes, education, even crime. Relatively, crime has to be pretty bad for crime to be a major issue that people are voting for in elections. Like if there's a crime epidemic, maybe something like crime could enter it, and something like immigration, connecting it to crime, could be a way. But but generally you have your major issues that people care about, and your political platform just has to pick a handful of those issues enough to seize power, and then once they have power, you need funding. Like even if your political party seizes power to some extent, you need to constantly get funding. So they might seize to the big lobbies like the oil and gas companies or natural resources manufacturing companies, because they need the flow of donations to keep their party running. And that's how in states like Michigan, there's all sorts of lobbies like that successfully have their interests met below the radar of the general public. There's the Lottery Commission, alcohol, natural resources, certain manufacturers, where they basically successfully control both parties. So like the electrical grid here in Michigan, in most states, there's one or two companies that controls the electric, natural gas for the whole state. And basically those have complete domination over the whole party, let alone the natural resource places, the mining companies that extract the natural gas or coal or lumber, something like that. It almost never does that come to where voters would actually be voting on an issue concerned to that. And you might have Democrats largely more favorable towards the environment and less favorable towards but generally they control both, all the parties. I'm not sure if your party would make a difference in that calculation, that if you guys somehow won and seized power, that you would cede to the interest of the electrical companies and natural gas and resource and coal miners, because you would just need the political support and the money, and it wouldn't be a pressing issue that even your voters are really concerned about.
I could see that. But I guess you talk about Canada so much, and we'll divert it back to American politics. Has any of the two parties mentioned about Appalachia, the Appalachian Mountains, the people that live up there, like the coal miners or anything like that?
No, but that was kind of how Trump, like Hillary Clinton was willing to forsake those people, and that's what Trump is trying to possibly bring back the steel business, bring back the coal business. But that's unlikely because people don't really want those jobs. At the same time, they'd probably be more likely to want to switch towards a welfare state, because of the change in technology and the health consequences of working those jobs, that in the nature of those jobs through robotics, like Andrew Yang or something. So even though Trump was able to defeat Hillary Clinton, maybe in Virginia or a few of those states, by getting the coal miners and things like tariff on the Chinese in order to increase the steel production here, I don't think there's going to be a mass boom of those jobs coming back. So not really, and I'm not sure if you think so too, that the creation of a welfare state, even among those people, is probably going to be more popular than getting their jobs back.
I don't think so. I think people like to work for a living and they like to feel like their life has purpose. They don't not necessarily want to be on welfare, and that welfare. Talk about what Yang bucks now? I
don't mean that they prefer welfare because they don't want to work, but those jobs, technology has changed, and the health consequences of working those jobs, that for decades what a coal miner may have done, these days would just be considered unsafe working conditions, and the technology has changed it where it's become automated to such a large degree where you don't really need so many coal miners. You need huge machines and very few workers. That they're really, even so if you had a Democratic push to switch to clean energy and not have so much natural gas extraction or coal extraction, in terms of the number of jobs, doesn't appear to be making a huge difference. That there's not, even if President Trump pushed for policies, and which he has done and been relatively successful, like the natural gas and coal extraction, but the nature of those, my background civil engineering, I don't know how much science or like Yang and looked into his ideas about automation, but it's saying no, the people aren't going to go back to the coal mines. You're going to have huge machines that may be, so if you want more coal, it's not like you're going to have a whole bunch of people returning to the mines. You're going to have these huge machines doing it.
But why would you want to live in a welfare state, though, sitting on your butt and getting a check from the state that has strings attached to it? Like, if you have the populist views, what's stopping the state from cutting off your welfare?
Well, I'm just saying that the coal miners aren't going to return to mining coal. Those jobs have changed due to changes in technology and in the health conditions. So even though, yeah, it's good to work for a living, but do you really want to do a job that a machine could do better than you? And do you really want to risk your health for something? And if the only choice is a welfare state, because it's like farming, where for populations like China and India that had huge population centers and were able to say, let's reject.
So you want everybody to be crowded in the city? Is that what you want? Is that what you love?
No, I don't think you have to crowd in the city.
You love swimming in the cesspool of Babylon? Is that what you love?
Well, I'm more an urban character, but I think, like, if you want people to farm, even though technology, there's theories of labor, like Andrew Yang. Like, I like Yang. I like the concept of universal basic income. But I was mentioning, like, Trump, who had won over the coal miners. A lot of that data, shows that really there hasn't been like an increase in coal jobs, and all the stuff about Trump's job numbers. America's still switching to like a service economy, the manufacturer economy. Some plants are coming due to tariffs or a certain thing that Trump's doing, but the technology has just changed through automation, the number of people that work in those type jobs. And so if you're going to reject automation in order that you have a job, I don't think people are going to do that. I think they'd rather live on welfare than reject automation and inefficiently work in a job that's detrimental to their health when they could just live off the welfare of the state.
Why would you want to be dependent upon the state for your means of survival? It seems kind of an alien concept to me,
It doesn't.
A lot of people like to work, right?
I mean, you can have it in a more
like why would you want to spend? What would you spend the rest of your life doing? Like, if you just sat on your butt all day, like how would people live?
I say urban planning. I'm saying, like, so 100 years ago, 90% of people lived in rural areas and 10% in urban areas, and there's been a huge shift where, maybe more than like 150 years ago before industrialization. Now, 90% of people live in urban areas. But if you have equipment, like tractors and all this industrial equipment, where one person could farm for thousands and thousands of people, as opposed to 150 years ago where one person could farm for maybe 5-10 people, it's unlikely that people are going to desire to use. So, okay, you have the freedom to, someone has to operate these huge industrial farms that, if you look at like states where like corn, potatoes, crops are just grown in huge monolithic areas where they grow crops that feed hundreds of millions of people across the country in these monolithic farming areas that are done through industrial means, that you have to be a slave to the system that provides you your food and your sustenance. But are you really going to reject that and say, no, I want to grow my own food?
There's some people doing it already, like Owen Benjamin is doing it. He's Jewish. He wants to basically, he sees the faults in having genetically modified foods, because the thing is, you can't reuse that soil once you planted that crop in, and so it takes longer for that soil to replenish, and so you have to use a different land. So as well, it's also bad for it's bad for the environment around it as well too, and so basically you can only go on so long. And you have this continuous population growth where we're going to get to a point now where you're going to have food shortages, because you have global warming, you have the hottest summer on record in Europe, and it's been pretty hot here. I don't know. Has it been hot in Detroit this summer?
No, thank God. It's been relatively mild here. Like, I mean, I think global warming is going to make Michigan a pretty good place.
Right, but the thing is, there's going to be consequences to that. Like, it's going to mess up the growing seasons, like for California, and then it's going to get less rain, and there's going to be the Indians will want to migrate to North America. So this is just a start. Like, it's only a matter of time before we're going to have like a major industrial collapse, not necessarily financial collapse, but a resource collapse of the industrial society.
Yeah, but that could be. Although, I mean, there's. I mean, I had my debate with JF on that, and you know, saying like whether if people were to switch to vegetarian, that could make then estimates are without damaging the environment, the world could hold 10 billion people if we gave up beef eating or something like that, or different scenarios. But either way, in terms of the larger labor question and industrialization versus the welfare state, that at the end of the day, it's likely that you're going to have mass-produced almost everything. You know, not just food and farming, but you know, houses and industry and everything. That even I did that's my highlighted video on my channel now for a few months, is the universal basic income. That by 2050, that you know, almost half of all jobs are going to be automated, including intellectual jobs. And you know, so the question is, what are we going to do? People desire to work, you know, so you might have your farm and like grow a few crops and eat a little bit of food, but even though it's economically not viable, where you couldn't really sell those crops for any money because you know, that they could be grown for so cheap and shipped and gotten to you, that it wouldn't be economically viable, although you might do it for you and your friends to have like local homegrown food, because that's what you choose to do with your time. So if you got like a UBI $1,000 a month, and you know, saying, okay, you're not going to be able to learn to code because almost all of the needed efforts and work for people is going to be some form of learning how to code, that you're just going to, you know, grow your own food and live cheaply and enjoy whatever you consider the good life. So for the perspective of a business, that you won't be able to be in the business of farming or competing against automation, because you won't be able to make a living. The sale price of it would just be too low. And whether it's the government or private companies, it's just likely the technology will force it as is. It has to be that if it was possible for one person to farm for tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, that you're not going to have a lot of people farming.
Well, why would people want to live in cities, though? Don't people prefer to live in rural communities?
Well, I don't see a connection. I'm saying, like, you don't have to move to cities. There's certain, and in fact, you know, with the power of the internet, could be a delocalization where, you know, everything you're getting from Amazon, you don't need local stores anymore. So people could return to rural areas. And, you know, if you had your UBI and you wanted to move to a rural area, and you could get your amenities through the internet or ordering, I mean, there could be a push to cities for certain reasons, but at the same
time, what if somebody has political views that are not congruent with the state's agenda? Like, say, if somebody's against immigration, what's stopping the state from cutting off UBI for that someone?
Well, it depends who administers it. So, I mean, presumably the state is going to have to administer it, because private companies, although in theory could be benevolent and just you hook people up with checks or charity, it's likely to be administered through the state. Although, I mean, it's possible, like the Mormon Church or something like that, where the Mormon Church might be a better administrator, at least for their constituency, or like the Catholic Church could make a revival where you'd have you know, Catholic farms, or it could be segregated where you have Jewish farm, Mormon farms, Catholic farms, that just provide services to their own people. I mean, that's conceivable, but it's a question about automation versus policy. That there's a direction of automation, and it's almost certain that the automation is going to happen regardless of what policy a country chooses. And even if there's some sort of a dystopian collapse of society, it's still likely someone is going to get their act together and automate and mass produce these things and have these resources at hand. And they'll be, whether they have the free whim to do as they please with it, or whether they're regulated by higher powers of the government or bodies like the church that are going to force their hand in what they do with these resources that they're mass producing, or just a capitalistic type system, isn't going to change the fact that automation is going to affect it no matter how you organize society.
Okay.
I don't
So
know.
it's basically who gets in charge, who gets in their hands on the automation. It's not a matter of if automation is going to put a lot of people out of jobs.
Yeah,
I've heard a different story though. Like driverless cars is actually pretty hard to automate because there's a lot of intricacies in driving like trucks or semis.
I did a stream on that on my channel. I mean, it's because of the infrastructure where you need the current infrastructure is set up for gas cars, where to automate automobiles, you wouldn't need gas stations anymore. You'd need charging stations. You might need battery changing stations. You might need roads built in a different way. So you need a phase out period to change the infrastructure from one system to another, just like wind or gas. You're changing from coal burnt power plants to a solar wind power grid or different methods of power. The infrastructure was built to harness to benefit a certain system that would take much time to. I did a whole stream public study session that went over the phase out plan. So currently there are driverless cars that are relatively safe, although they're legally not able to be used on the roads. So as the regulation changes, and then you need certain sensors or different kinds of roads, and say most driverless cars are going to be electric, and so you'll no longer have like gas stations on every corner. You'll need to have charging stations or battery changing stations on every corner instead of gas stations. And that will be a slow phase-in period where you'll start seeing a few charging stations. You'll start seeing a few like battery changing stations. And then by like 2050, there won't be any gas stations anymore. There'll all be battery changing stations and charging stations.
How do you know this, David?
Well, I'm a civil
because I've gotten like different sources where it's very hard to especially automate not only driverless cars, but also industrial or manufacturing jobs, because they still require an intricate skill level that it's very hard to automate, like to make products. So I'm not quite sure. I'm kind of skeptical on people who say that automation is inevitably, because I view that as kind of a political power play to siphon wealth off of the working people, off of the middle class to the lower class, and for the state to do it. So I don't see anytime soon automation actually being that big of a deal as you say it is.
I have two public study sessions that I did. This one's actually one of the few ones I did. I got less than 100 views, but on autonomous vehicles, driverless cars, and like they're time stamped. I have links in the chat. I go through the studies and I show the phase-in values. What's the state of current technology? Where's technology going? And the estimates. Obviously, I'm here in Metro Detroit, and I have training in civil engineering. But if you want to see this public study session on driverless cars, and I go through the data of what's currently available, the history of it, what's coming in the future, how these things will phase out, and the estimates where most people are predicting that by 2050. So here's an example of a chart, 2020 to 2070, where it's assumed that by 2070, basically there's going to be all autonomous vehicles, and possibly by 2050, it'll be at least 50% driverless vehicles. Possibly it'll be almost all driverless vehicles by 2050, but by 2070, and this has been studied. This is the output of the major car manufacturing companies. For example, I could go in more detail of the specific companies in my stream on universal basic income and automation. This was definitely more popular than one on autonomous vehicles, and I include the studies of like McKinsey and the major papers, including the phase out periods that when it's going to happen, and even the McKinsey study goes through multiple different professions that showing the likelihood of what's available, what's coming, and how long will it take to phase the different things out. So if you're interested in that, that's what I created these YouTube videos for. Or you could just, if you don't want to listen to me talk about it, you could just click on the links in the descriptions there.
Okay, I'll definitely check that out.
Yeah, but this is relatively accepted projections by.
Is it just talking about driverless cars though, not necessarily automation in general?
I have two separate streams. The first stream was driverless cars, and the second stream was UBI and automation. I mean, driverless cars is connected to automation, but that stream is just on driverless cars, and it's going over the history of the technology, what's currently available, when in the future are the other things expected to be available, and what type of government policy needs to be implemented, and even there are government policies in different states that are moving towards it, and then also the phase out and changes of infrastructure. Like I was saying, you can't have driverless cars without electrical charging. There's different ways to electrical charge. You could have like roads that have magnetic strips or whatever that charge the cars as they go. You could have battery changing stations. You could have charging stations. But currently right now you have gas stations all over the place. So you could look by like 2050, by 2070, there's going to be almost no gas stations because cars aren't going to run on gas. But even if, let's say Tesla right now has a driverless car that works for certain aspects, that works on the highway and has self-parking, although it's illegal to use. So even though Tesla, I think the Model S has a self-driving option that when it gets on the highway, you could put in an auto drive, or it has a self-parking option. It's none of the states in the U.S. currently allow you to use the self-driving option or the self-park option, although you could use it on private property. But that currently is an existing technology, and you could even purchase a Tesla that has that, even though it's illegal to enable that feature on a public road. But the infrastructure would have to change in order for that, and the car companies and the companies that do this, in fact, like Saudi Aramco, ExxonMobil, all these major gas companies are looking into it. It's likely that the companies that will be doing the charging are going to be the same companies, like Saudi Aramco and ExxonMobil and Shell Gas, and all these places will likely be the same companies that are going to be providing you your services for your electric vehicles, and it's their own reports. So it's not like some leftist journal report that I'm giving you the projections. It's the projections from the automotive companies and the gas companies that have made these projections. And then for automation, these are industry-based statistics. They're not governmental research. These are studies like private think tanks that are paid for by the major manufacturers, or the manufacturers themselves, that say what's the current state of technology, what's the change in infrastructure, and what's the time frame for the phase-in. I'm not sure if you, what's your educational background?
Business administration for 2 years.
And did you do? I mean, so you understand the concept of like a phase-in?
A little bit, yes, I do.
You know, you have a new policy, and you can't just one day like the old policy is no longer valid and the new policy is enacted. It doesn't work that way. You have phase-in periods where parts of the old way are still in use, and then parts of the new way are put into use. And over a period of a few years or tens of years or decades, eventually the old system is completely not used anymore, and the new system is completely used. But so these are these phase-in methods that have to, and for something like driverless cars, these have to include multiple different players. It has to include computer security, manufacturer, energy companies, law, insurance, banking, all these different factors that have to, how you, if they cost more money, how are you going to pay for it? How are you going to insure it? So things like driverless cars, it could be that no longer will you own the car. Maybe you'll rent the car, and the company will, so if you had driverless cars, maybe you don't need it sitting in your driveway. Maybe there could be like a storage place everywhere, and when you need to go somewhere, it just comes and picks you up. Or the different models like the battery where you buy gas, and so there's multiple different things that have to align in order for these to work. And automation also, so like I was talking like coal mining, so 100 years ago where you had guys with pickaxes in mines that were God forbid only living to 40-50 years old because of particulate matter and smoke inhalation and just bad working conditions, where now you have these huge machines that just require an operator, and the operator might not, it could be driverless, a drone, a truck where the operator is not even in the machine, the operator is in a computer room. But that's also like a phase-in type thing that happens over decades. So the coal industry, largely, that's already been done. Like there's no dudes with pickaxes in mines anymore. That hasn't been the case for decades already.
But can't you see the political ramifications of countries that are dependent upon coal or oil or gas, like Saudi Arabia, Canada, especially, and I guess to some extent the United States. I guess the United States makes its own oils, so I guess they're more self-sufficient.
In China, you still might have, because China, you have so much people there, you might have dudes with like pickaxes in coal mines. But like nowhere in the developed world do you have guys with pickaxes in coal mines. That hasn't been the case for decades, and it'd be illegal to do that because of like health concerns and the people dying at like 50. So in China, God forbid, you still have people with pickaxes in coal mines that die at like 40 years old, or have, I think there was a case in South America like a month ago where they had the people trapped in the coal mine, if you remember that. It was a big news story like a few months ago or like a few years ago.
No, I didn't hear about it.
It was like a international news story where in somewhere in South America there were these dudes trapped in a coal mine.
Oh yeah. I've heard about it. Yeah.
But it's like automation has changed that, so I don't think there's anywhere in Canada where you have like dudes in a coal mine. That's not the case anymore. You have we don't even send people into coal mines. We send like automated machines into the coal mine. And so in places like South America or China, you still have dudes with pickaxes going into coal mines. But in Canada, like it's probably illegal to do that. You couldn't even have guys with pickaxes going into coal mines if they wanted to.
Yeah, the thing is, though, they're having a hard time finding engineers to replace, to keep up with the demand of this new technology. I remember listening on the radio that they are concerned that they're going to run out of engineers in the next 20, 30 years, and that can cause power outages without that skilled work. So,
what's the likelihood
when you're declining the IQ of the population, and you're not incentivizing men to have families, they're not going to be motivated to get to these jobs as much.
Do you see any scenario under your political party where you're proposing dudes with pickaxes returning to coal mines?
I see oil workers going back. I don't necessarily see coal, because coal's not necessarily
Who works in
abundant in
oil?
Canada, but like there's actually nuclear energy is actually pretty popular in Ontario,
Yeah,
and
but
that
oil,
waste is actually easier to dispose as
how many
opposed to
people work
solar
in oil?
panels or more maintenance to upkeep.
How many people work in oil these days?
A lot, especially where I am anyway.
But administrative, or what does it mean to be an oil guy? Like an accountant?
It could be anything. It's a multitude of jobs. Like you could be a laborer, you can be an engineer, you can. It's basically just like who you know, right?
What's
And
a laborer do in oil these days? I mean, what's not automated already in the oil? What possibly could a laborer do in the oil business today?
they could still do a lot of things. I guess they could train with the engineers or whatever, and
You can't even give an
kind of
example
hold their toolbox. And I don't know. I haven't worked in the oil fields, but
because it doesn't exist. I'm saying there are no laborers in the oil industry anymore. There's machine operators.
well, there is still laborers. Yeah, I know a lot of people are still laborers.
What do they do?
They're just basically, um,
Machine operators? I mean, what does it mean?
yeah, they're machine operators. Yeah,
I mean, that's not really a labor. I mean, that's
yeah,
but it's an effective automation. Like once you go automated, there's no turning back.
right.
And you're saying, okay, there could be an apocalypse where society collapses and no one understands how to use these machines anymore. And in order to keep the system running, and it'd be almost it'd be almost no chance that people are gonna. I mean, one thing, it wouldn't work. Like if the machines broke and the people couldn't figure out how to work them anymore, like having thousands of millions of people running back into the mines with pickaxes, wouldn't work. Like it wouldn't be able to replace the amount that the machine was able to produce. And because it's been so distant, the generations, they probably like saying, like, even if your grandfather had been a pickaxer in a coal mine, like you probably you wouldn't be able to do it. You wouldn't be able to figure it out. And you can't really go back. Like I don't see it. And that has nothing to do with the banking politics. I mean, there's certainly a method of like international banking and politics that supports this, but these technological changes, it's just like horses. It's almost impossible. I mean, in Detroit tonight, we had police on horseback. That is more ceremonial, but I mean, basically, it'd be impossible if the automobile collapsed, society collapsed, and all the factories that produce automobiles, no one knew how to operate them anymore. It's inconceivable that society en masse would return to the horse. There might be a few people that still remember how to use horses, or that would have horses and use them, but that society as a whole would go back to the horse is basically inconceivable.
Well, if they can't operate the machine and the pickaxes can't do as much work to sustain our current population, what's propping up the population? They wouldn't really have much choice other than to be more self-sufficient, I guess. So basically, you'll have food shortages too, right? You have food shortages, you have an energy crisis, and just like what's happening in India or in Central Asia, you have a lot of political turmoil, and people want to immigrate here, and that has something to do with the ecological collapse as well too.
Yes, I mean, you could have like Andrew Yang and like UBI, where you're going to have these super high IQ Asians that are going to come and operate the machines for us, and then give us a welfare check. And so in Canada, you might look like, okay, like two things, like, are your native Canadians going to be able to operate the machine? And if they can't operate the machine, do they trust these like high IQ foreigners to run the machine for them and then give them a welfare check? Or is it possible I mean, but the
or
level,
is it just a military takeover possible as well too? A Chinese military or a Russian military takeover of the West?
Well, you can't really enslave high-skilled labor. You could enslave low-skilled labor, but it's basically impossible to have a slave force of high-skilled labor. So the high-skilled labor eventually is likely to run the society. You're not going to be able to shackle a bunch of engineers and scientists.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's an ethnic component where you're saying like the people that you want to support, and if you just close immigration, one thing, are you going to operate? Automation also usually implies a global supply chain because the nature of technology and resources is international now. So I've talked about these on streams, and it's an unfortunate part of policy. So from a perspective of creating a technocracy, politics usually just gets in the way. And that's what you see here in the US with like Silicon Valley and different things where, or even, we were mentioning the coal and the electricity businesses that basically control both parties through lobbying and donations. But, generally the policy just gets in the way of the technocracy because they see what is going to work best for their global supply chain. And then how do they convince the governments to work together with them in the greater forces? So the automation pressures, from the political aspect, no one's really talking about that. Like, people don't understand it. They're not trained in it. And they're just worried about other issues or how they're going to tax it or how the welfare state is going to look. And, but yeah, I would predict that you're going to have some sort of global welfare state based on automation. And if you don't understand these things, you're going to be lower down in the pecking order of the technocracy. And even as a political party, where if you rally together voters on these different issues, you're still going to have the fundraising and issues. And day one, when you get into power and you see that the machine needs to be greased, people need their electricity. People need their new gadgets. When you get a power outage or some sort of slowdown in the logistics of the global supply chain, and you as a politician don't know how to fix it, you're at the whims of the companies to keep on running efficiently.
So you're saying basically that we are controlled by the corporations. The corporations have total control, and therefore the political system is just a farce of power.
Well, I'm not saying that there's a control factor. I mean, I'd say there's higher forces. I mean, God at the end of the day is controlling, or the pressure of higher forces that so it's not like necessarily the corporations are in control, because if one corporation wasn't doing it, the next one. So, I mean, if one oil refinery or coal company closed down, like a new one would probably open up, or something like that. The global supply chain, like if the U.S. and Canada weren't pushing for like fracking and different oil drilling techniques, we would just be buying our oil from the Middle East or whatever. So it's not like there could ever be complete control, because there's so many different factors. But I'm just saying that there's a push of technology that changes society, and it's really unstoppable. And whether there's a person in control or not. So I mean, even once a person creates an invention, maybe there's a patent on it, the patent expires, but at a certain point, everyone's going to use it. Like everyone has automobiles now at every place in the world. There's not like a single country that hasn't become dominated by the automobile.
Do you think that with whites being displaced, that this thing can still happen? Like, whites will still be the elite, but they'll be like there was like a Eurasians. I don't know. They're a minority white Muslim population, and a lot of Africans think that, well, just because that we have the numbers now, we'll take control. But I guess they don't really understand the nature of power, and that you'll still have Gentile whites and Jews and maybe Asians still running these things. having the ultimate power.
It's interesting in my public study session on UBI that it's actually these intellectual fields that are going to be replaced by artificial intelligence. So you have automation on the level of manual labor, but actually the most repetitive, easy thing to replace is going to be these intellectual jobs like accounting and banking. So so you might have Jews that historically have a role in finance and like looking over mortgage broking and bookkeeping and things like that. But the computer is likely to replace close to 90% of those jobs. I mean, according to the studies, that what's the purpose of having a person review your credit report or something like that when you could have computers that would be significantly better at just looking at a person's credit score and determining whether they should get a loan or doing their bookkeeping or something like that. With the cell phones, like Chinese are actually more advanced than here in the West, where you could have like your cell phone that where you're just checks and all of your financial transaction in one-stop shop. And a lot of these service jobs will be eliminated also. Even things like medicine. I mean, the idea is that automation isn't just going to be for like low-skilled jobs. It's actually going to be intellectual jobs that are going to be also replaced by computers and automation. I mean, you do business administration, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what skill do you have that doesn't appear like it could be in the next few years or few decades replaced by a computer?
Customer service, I guess, and sales.
Even customer service and sales likely. I mean, why can't that be replaced by a computer?
I don't know. I guess there's intricate interactions with people, but sometimes it is robotic. But other times there's objections that require critical thinking. I don't know if you can automate, but it's not like accounting where you just keep your dot your I's and cross your T's. It's more kind of creative thinking. So I don't see my job getting automated anytime soon. Because it requires some creative thinking, right?
Creative thinking is the likely thing that won't be replaced. So you have the people who are programming the machines, and they acquire substantial amount of power. And yeah, I mean Andrew Yang is relatively interesting because these concepts that are kind of a given, that it's been changing society, but people don't really understand it. So you could have people like Bernie Sanders and on the left who are just like, we're going to create this welfare state where you're going to have free education and handouts. It seems to be the direction, and the demographic replacement issue is secondary because that's not going to change the issue at hand facing the European majority places. You could have a different take on demographic replacement and immigration. I mean, it's also related to the welfare state where the automation, you're more likely to have automation in the wealthier countries, and then those countries will be able to provide a superior welfare state, which will naturally create the flux of immigrants, that the immigrants want to come to have the benefit of the welfare state. And I mean, so there's multiple issues facing it at the same time, but at the same time, the native-born people require high.
Do you think that there's a limit to this, though? Like, there's only so many resources, and you can't necessarily, because the market wisdom is humans have infinite needs or wants, and the market provides for it, and basically the magic hand of the market provides for your needs, or is it introduced competition that phases out unwanted businesses or services, I guess.
You have a utopian or a dystopian view of what's going to happen. And I'm not sure. I mean, do you watch JF in the public space?
A little bit. I've kind of waned off a little bit, but what's he been talking about lately?
Well, not much, but I'm saying his revolutionary phenotype with his concept of the computer taking over genetic engineering or his fear that the computers will eventually be able to create superior humans, so humans will become basically enslaved to the machine to determine what's the best way to genetically engineer their children. If you read his book or familiar.
Yeah, I get the gist of it. Basically, there's this gene that if you introduce it into like being less prone to getting Alzheimer's or autism, if that exists, or if you want introduce a gene that makes your kid more athletic, what these genes are going to do, they're going to take over all the other genes, and basically it's going to replace the human species as we know it, and it's going to be another new type of species.
But he has a computer artificial intelligence method of it that in the beginning, genetic engineering, people will choose certain features like maybe people will want their children to not have certain diseases or to have certain features, and then eventually the computer will have a better determination of what features you should choose for your child. So the people in the beginning, people will just look at a various slate of options and choose among a slate of options. But eventually, people will just turn over the decision to the computer because the computer will make a better decision than the person themselves. So even though you might look at varied possible genetic engineering options and through a series of options, like I want this one, I want that one, and I want that one, or whatever, so on and so on, that eventually you're just going to say, I'll do whatever the computer recommends. I mean, if that's kind of what JF is saying, and then once that happens, where people are going to do whatever the computer recommends, that the computer will basically take over. And I mean, I'm not sure if you understood his theory like that.
Yeah, basically the computer will take over and it'll recommend genes for you as opposed to humans having the free will to choose what they want.
Yeah, once that happens, I mean, it's going to happen naturally because the computer will make better choices for us. So, what if you have children, and
like the computer will foresee things that we can't foresee. Is that what you're saying?
Well, the computer will just make a better choice than you would. So, if you were trying to determine what genetic engineering, let's say your genetic engineering became a real thing, and there were actually like a whole bunch of traits that you could actually like choose, like which ones do you want to, how do you want to genetically engineer your child, and you have a whole bunch of options that you choose from, that it's unlikely to work that way where you would just go with the package that the computer recommends, because your choice level, there's so many different genes and so many different possibilities, and they might vary in a certain way. You're not going to understand the complications of the calculation, but the computer will be able to. And
so the computer can basically make what it wants, and it can make a serial killer if it wants, or it can make a really nice person. So like how can we monitor?
Dystopian.
Does the computer have its own consciousness?
No, I mean, it doesn't even require a consciousness of a computer. You're just talking about something, like how many, the genetic code, there's billions of different genes or whatever the case. I didn't want to explain JF's phenotypic revolution theory because I'm not even sure if he's correct about that. But from that perspective of globalization, that eventually it'll just be handed over to the computer. Like look at the global supply chain and things that you just don't understand, or I don't understand.
Right. That's a distribution of resources. That's different than affecting a human internally, right? And its genetic behavior and its genetic dispositions.
Yeah, I mean, so I think what I'm talking about is actually simpler.
Comparing apples to apples, you're comparing apples to oranges.
Yeah, I would just giving the example because JF's a popular streamer. It's related to his idea, and actually from a logistics level till today, a lot of logistics is done by the computer, and it's done by what we call artificial intelligence. I mean, it doesn't mean computers have their own consciousness, but there's a machine learning algorithm. So what's the best way to distribute the global supply chain of resources and workers and everything? And it's beyond your any human's ability for manufacturing. Like the automobile is the most manufactured thing in the world. That's the biggest global supply chain. I think over 50% of all manufacturing in the world is related to the automobile because it's something that basically all of us have. And it has resources that go into it that come from all over the world. But just looking at the automobile, like, how do you understand how your car works, or all the components, or where the stuff comes from, and like the different parts of your car?
I drive an import car.
But even your import car is saying that it's not just like it might be made in Japan or something, but whatever the case is, the different components and pieces of it come from a global supply chain, and there's not a person that understands the global supply chain. It's computer software that determines the global supply chain that is ran to increase efficiency. And you might have people that overlook it, but generally at this point already, the computer is already the one that controls how the global supply chain operates and works, because it's beyond the capabilities of a single human mind. I mean, I'm not sure.
You're telling me the logistics classes I take is pointless now because of automation?
No, you'll work together with the machine.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you're not necessarily automating jobs out, you're just creating new ones, right?
Well, a little of both, but I'm saying that when you do logistics, you don't have like a little notebook where you add all the stuff up. You work with a computer program, and the computer program will make recommendations to you, and you basically follow the recommendations of the computer. So if you're talking about, let's say you have a widget, whether it's an automobile or a printer or a computer, and it has 1,000 different components, and there's 1,000 different suppliers and all your different natural resources that takes to make it. It's inconceivable that you're going to be able to master this global supply chain. That's not what you're going to do in logistics. You're going to be programming a computer to do it for you, and then you're going to interpret the data that the computer tells you to make the decision. So at some point, the decision-making power could be handed over to the computer. So now if you're in logistics, the decision-making power still resides with you. You program the computer, the computer gives you output, and then based on the output that the computer gives you, you make a decision. And even today, a lot of these decisions have been automated to the computer. So like if you're making 1,000 different components that make your device, and the computer tells the different factories over the world how much of the material they need to mine, and how much of the widgets and all the parts of logistics that are necessary. You don't necessarily have to authorize every decision that the computer makes. A lot of those things are automated, and you just let the computer trust that the computer has made the correct calculation, right? I mean, that's the current state. That's not even like a futuristic thing. That's the current status of how international logistics work, where a lot of it already has been automated, that the computer makes the calculation, and that calculation is determining how much resources are mined and how many widgets are made, right?
Yeah, to some degree, yes, but you also have to take in consideration the different strategies and different needs of businesses and trends. Do they keep track of, does the computer automate the trends of what a company might need for supplies?
Well, humans still have overriding power. The computer doesn't control the company, but the computer is programmed where a lot of aspects of the company are basically on autopilot, and the number of
okay, so basically you would program it so that if you say I need car parts because there's a higher demand for Dodge vehicles, I need more Dodge car parts. So I just put this in the algorithm, say, okay, algorithm, carry out these tasks. We need this much material from this country, and we need it by Friday.
Yeah, and you might not even need to approve it. So you might have to do like a manual approval where you actually have to, approve the transfer of money and approve the number of parts ordered. But from my understanding, a lot of that is currently automated, where you don't even need a human operator that approves, the number of parts ordered or the payment of services, where that could be automated, where the computer makes the calculations that, okay, this is going to be this type of car, not that type of car, and that requires this amount of resource being mined and these number of parts being made and this amount of money being transferred to finance it. And you may or may not even need a human operator to validate that. It may just be naturally done by the computer, or the human operator may only need to validate it on certain large enough scales, or look at a weekly or daily report, or whatever the case is. And that's only going to become more and more. And the dependency on the computer is going to become greater and greater. So even if you're the automotive executive and you're looking at your profit sheets and you're basically just trusting the computer to tell you how many of these different components you need, and even to make the payments for it, and you're just checking the books every week to make sure that you're making profit or that there's nothing going wrong. And as artificial intelligence increases, the computer is going to give you certain recommendations. And the same with like JF's revolutionary phenotype, from the business perspective, you're basically going to be forced to accept the recommendation of the computer for these financial projections. So if you're looking like, what decision should you make? Should you make this model car or that model car? And the computer says this because of calculations that are beyond your ability to understand. You're probably just going to go with the computer's projections, even if you can't understand why the computer is recommending it. And that will slowly change the way that the global economy works. So what if the computer recommends immigrants, immigration or something like that, where the computer is recommending to you, or the structure of your, well, I mean, it could be in your favor. Let's say you program it into the computer and the computer says you need less immigrants in order to have a better functioning economy. But what if the computer tells you that like what you should do is transfer people from this part of the world to that part of the world in order to increase corporate profit? So if you don't see what I'm saying?
I guess the computer can make decisions when it comes to mathematics and left brain thinking, but I don't think it can make moral judgments on what makes a good character or not, or it can't predict trends, right? Like the business cycles, like you can kind of predict it, but you still need to manually track that. You can't necessarily automate it, right? Because like you can still, like the market still kind of has a bit of randomness to it, so nothing's really set in stone when it comes to that market demand. There's a lot of variables that come to that, but I see what you mean by manufacturing goods and services. I mean, that is possible. That's a set activity that needs to be done.
Yeah, it can be never going to become conscious or make decisions for itself, but I'm saying that the ability of the computer.
You said that it can make, if the computer says more immigration is good, that we should follow the computer. So it can make moral judgments, is what you're claiming. When you say more immigration, it's just more than just economic units. It's like, what do these people practice? What religion do they practice? What culture are they coming from? What's their customs? Like, would the computer do that? Does it have a soul where it can do that, or is it just
No, it's unlikely. I mean, it's conceivable you would be able to program that into the computer and the computer could factor that. But if you're just talking about world logistics and output for manufacture, that if you're talking about,
what does immigration have to do with logistics though? Like, India is globalized, has a globalized market. China has a globalized market, but it's only North American countries that accept mass immigration. Just because your economy is more globalized doesn't necessarily mean that you have more immigration, right? Like, you can be connected, but that doesn't mean globalization doesn't mean more immigration. Like, logistics has nothing to do with immigration.
the thing is, a globalized economy, you still have a lot of people that go to China, like Shanghai, the technology center.
Yeah, but you don't see a lot of white people going there and saying, "Hey, China, it's not really Chinese. It's for the white man." It's because we're historically always been here. You don't hear that.
Well,
from
you do.
people.
You do
China.
because you have your centers like Shanghai or Singapore, where they have adapted their government to make it more comfortable for the white man or the European. As the European has gained more power, they've changed the structure of those societies. I mean, even places like Japan or South Korea that have adapted their society in order to make it more amenable to globalization that's affected everybody.
Right, but does that mean that that a bunch of white people are gonna come in there and displace the local population? Does that justify? Does colonization justify mass immigration?
What's the birth rate? So I mean, talking democracy, it's hard for a small population people. I mean, it's like Jews, like usually don't use demographic displacement because we don't have large population in terms of Europeans. I mean, there's a lot more Europeans than there are Jews, but Europeans on a global scale are a small demographic number, so they're not unlikely to do it through demographic replacement. But possibly in places like Singapore, you might have a sizable amount of Europeans there that you could even consider that demographic. But that's not necessarily the point I was making about if the computer is saying for the point that the computer recommendation is bring people from the east to the west, and the computer is not recommending sending people from the west to the east. And if at some point the efficiency, I mean, if you study economics, you just have efficient markets.
If you study economics, the computer would recommend less immigration right now, because there's only 26% high skilled immigrants that are working in the Canadian economy right now.
Well, they might recommend a certain type of immigrant, and
what kind of immigrant, Doooovid? Just any kind, or what?
Well, high skilled, high educated ones. I mean, it's like President Trump and his policy. You're saying President Trump is basically following the computer recommendation.
Right. Does that mean that it's good though? Do you think that these high skilled laborers actually have an interest in preserving the national identity of the West, though?
Good and bad makes no factor. I mean, that's a judgment, morality
Okay,
call.
so everything is based upon money now. Is that what it is? Everything, we value the dollar over our communities. That's what it is now.
Not
We're just
necessarily.
individual, atominized people, have no identity, have no roots,
I mean,
and our life is dictated by a computer now. Is that what you're saying?
I mean, it's possible that they're saying that your morals are not going to be able to override the power of the decision that the computer makes. So when the computer gives a recommendation for efficiency, and you make a moral judgment that you're
is this computer like going over there and like saying, "Hey, you guys gotta come over here," or who's actually carrying out the decisions of the computer?
It could be on. I mean, right now you don't have a global unified computer. You have so each company has their own separate IT system that they might listen. You don't have a unified computer system that makes societal decisions. So every corporation, every bank, every manufacturer, possibly even certain government agencies, by force operate according to the computer. It's by force of the enormous size of information that is beyond the capability of a person. Every efficient organization that operates for huge amounts of people is basically become enslaved, so to say, to the computer. But there is no globalized computer. As of now, there's only separate computer systems that operate for single units within the economy. So you might have a globalized supply chain software that Ford or the Koch brothers or Facebook or whatever uses, and they largely have to make their decisions based on economics because the stocks or share prices, or even governments that end of the day have to have balanced budgets. And so when the computer gives a recommendation and they don't like the moral judgment that the computer is telling it, it doesn't make a difference because they need to balance their budget or they need to increase whatever. So if
I want to make a computer that expels all the globalists.
Yeah, I mean, but you're not talking logically. I mean, it doesn't matter what you want.
Why? Why can't we keep our separate systems though, and
Because there is no
control
we.
and
Because I mean,
control
you have the
who has,
fallacy of the we, that who's the we. There is no we, there's just a you. So when you claim there to be a we, you're making a fallacy. There's just a you. So when you say
what do you mean to me?
there's just a singular Jon Vance and his desire, there is no, we, that, who is the we, and the we is subjective. So when you speak on behalf of the we, that may or may not be accurate, and it's most likely to be inaccurate. So you say like, oh, we the Europeans, or we the Canadians, and saying you don't actually have any authority to speak on anybody other than just yourself.
Well, what if I want a system that benefits we? But I guess we doesn't exist now.
We never existed. You can have a theoretical we. So saying you want a system that benefits you, that's reasonable. And so you might claim that a system that benefits a we, but you could dissect that. I mean, it's like Kevin McDonald's group evolutionary strategy, that genetically it's unclear whether that's even such a thing, that there's only a personal evolutionary strategy. They're not a group evolutionary strategy. And
are you accepted in the Jewish community, Phil?
The what?
Are you accepted in the Jewish community, or are you an outcast?
I mean, you'd have to ask the Jewish community. I mean, I don't think I'm an outcast, but
oh, okay. So you go to their gatherings and.
Yeah, I'm a member of multiple organizations. I mean, check my YouTube page. I have hundreds of Jewish events on it. But I can't speak on the.
Yeah, but how can the organization exist? You're just you, though.
Well, that's true. That's what I can't speak on the. I mean, it's like Mitt Romney, where he said corporations are people, and saying, yeah, corporations are made up of people, and saying like nations are people, and so just
Isn't that the we though? We the corporation, we the Jewish Foundation, we the ADL.
Yeah, we the collections of individuals that make up a larger entity, and there's multiple different we's.
Well, why can't I come together with individuals of my own? Why do you shun against that?
Right on, and good luck.
Okay.
So I mean, but I'm saying when you say we, and I mean you're part of a political party, and then we'll see how you do in October. So to say like it's like when Bernie Sanders says we, and you say we, Bernie Sanders speaks on behalf of a lot more Europeans than you do.
By the welfare state.
Well, for whatever reason, I'm saying that there's a factual element of power, of accumulation of power, and we's could always change. We's could always coalitions could always fall apart or build up factions. People gain and lose in popularity. But I was thinking more from the computer basis, that if the computer is factoring it in from an individual basis versus some sort of we.
Doooovid's computer for 2020. We'll all be individuals with RFID chips. Is that what you're for too? RFID chips, Doooovid?
It's possible.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean,
I think I'm going to head out. This was a great conversation, but I hope somebody maybe comes in and replaces me. But it's nice talking to you, Doooovid. Very fascinating conversation. So I'm going to head out now. So peace out.
Okay, take care. Okay, anyone else? I wasn't expecting John to come. He came, and we didn't end up talking about the topic at hand. We ended up talking about Canadian, and then related UBI. It's kind of interesting because the concept of UBI and yanggang, it's very complicated and requires a large amount of study. People who follow me regularly on my channel see like I play chess, and currently the chess computer programs are better than the top players by a substantial amount. The top computer would beat the best chess player easily without a question. So if a top chess player is looking at a computer recommendation versus their own idea, you'd have to assume like, well, the player would be stupid, it would be crazy to go off their own thoughts as opposed to what the computer tells them, because it's a factual reality that the computer just makes substantially better decisions when it comes to what the best chess move is than even the best players. And that currently is the state of large amounts of economics and logistics and engineering, where the computer basically makes the decision, and the engineer, the scientist, the intellectual just programs the computer and interprets the data that the computer gives them. Saying like, no, I mean, man can't get a rocket to the moon. The computer could get a rocket to the moon. Man could only program the computer that gets the rocket to the moon. It's like the dilemmas of calculus or the three-body gravitational problem. Certain problems are unsolvable, although they could be estimated within great accuracy. Although man can't estimate it, computers could estimate it. So from all of these things, like the man ourselves can't do it. The computer could do it. Man just programs the computer and follows the recommendation of the computer and is able to do that output. And how that will come possibly towards like a utopian or dystopian society. And so in a business type decision where you have a global supply chain, sometimes the computer, maybe like a chess move or something where the computer is telling you to do something, it's like, that can't be right. There has to be some sort of glitch. So you have human operators that will look at the logistics of what the computer is recommending. But at the end of the day, you're basically per force to follow the recommendation of the computer, because we know that the current state of economics and manufacture is beyond the capability of human calculation. No human with pen and paper would be able to do any of the things that these huge corporations do. It's the necessity of the computing power that allows these to operate. If the computer shut down, you wouldn't have Ford or any of these companies. I mean, it just wouldn't be conceivable for humans with pen and paper to make these calculations. So, eventually that will apply to, to take our free will. So if the computer says, okay, it'd be easier if people just had RFID chips inside of them, and that could be a human decision. So eventually, let's say the technology is there where you could insert RFID chips, like Elon Musk and his new machine that could supposedly interface with the brain to determine desires and control machines. But at some point where there is a thing where people do have RFID chips inserted in them, and the chip could override human desires, and whether human society like JF and his revolutionary phenotype eventually says yes, crime could be prevented, all these different things could happen if everyone just had RFID chips inside of them. But collectively, mankind would probably be like, yeah, like that idea doesn't sound too good to me. Is an interesting case. But in terms of the global politics, turning it over to the machine to help us make these decisions for a larger political thing, like certain like immigration, because you don't have an integrated IT system for everything. Like, Facebook that keeps on trying to do more and more things with their platform, and then, the disasters of free speech, and that they got to be broken up, and antitrust, or governmental systems where you could have, I was in New York City. I worked with the Department of Buildings and the Department of Transportation, and each agency may have had an integrated computer system, and then you might have had a single like web page, nyc.gov, and for property lots, so you could look up a lot, and the lot might connect together like 15 different governmental agencies, building permit, transportation, the deeds department and all these different things where you just click on a lot and then all the relevant information to that parcel of lot could be connected to that. And what power would there be, like in terms of zoning or something, where the computer started making decisions on zoning? So right now you could have human zoning people that make decisions based on the information the computer gives them, and they wouldn't be able to make good decisions without the power of the computer. But eventually, will the computer basically recommend the decision, and the person would basically be perforce, just like the chess move, what's the best chess move, where even the greatest chess player in the world is basically forced to accept the computer's recommendation that this is factually the best move, that will slowly apply to all fields of human endeavor, where even the greatest minds will perforce be determined to accept the recommendation of the computer. And that is an interesting philosophical question, could be a moral question, could be a determinative of will, and even to put into like racial, demographic, immigration type debates, and to say, well, what recommendation will the computer have? And you're saying, well, I prefer to be among my own, even if the computer tells me that that's going to be less efficient than being among your own, or the opposite, whatever the case is, where what scenario where are we going to be in, where do we have the power, even though we have the free will, to reject the recommendation of the computer, having the knowledge that the computer makes better decisions than us? Do we really have the free will to reject it, knowing that the computer is giving us a better recommendation than we will know ourselves? So this is a matter of deep conversations related to the Democratic debates policy. So you have kind of like Bernie Sanders, who is kind of just a wishful thinker, and like we'll be able to do it. The numbers were balanced, and like Bernie Sanders isn't good with money. Like he blew through his campaign funds, hundreds of millions of dollars in 2016, largely on a waste. Like Bernie Sanders, like let's pay famous actors to make commercials, millions of dollars, and then we'll pay to have it on the TV wave so people will vote for me. And saying, well, that's just kind of stupid. And I don't know if the computer would, if there would have been a way for him to determine, but in a fantastical thought to say, yes, we could have a welfare society. Yes, I mean, it could be dystopian or utopian, where we say, okay, what if the computer decides, God forbid, genocide's a good thing for efficiency, that a lot of people just aren't useful, and rather than creating a welfare state, that God forbid, it's better to just put them out of their misery. Or is there a control factor where you could override the computer and put in this basis, like all human value has supreme life, supreme value, and even if people can't fill a positive cost-benefit relationship to society where they take more than they give, that it still pays to keep them alive and provide them under the welfare state. And if you could program the computer to perforce make a decision that it doesn't want to make on behalf of people like that, that's possible. I mean, that's probably the current state. But yeah, the automation, the push for a mass welfare state seems like universal on the Democratic side. So you have different people that would have to put their thoughts together in a similar way in order to actually implement a positive welfare state. So you have like Bernie Sanders, more an idea guy. Elizabeth Warren has more background in law and policy and academics, and then maybe Andrew Yang, who understands technology better, Tulsi Gabbard, foreign policy, all the different people that would have to work together in order to implement something like this. But it seems pretty universal, this concept of a welfare state. And globalism, I mean, the computer is definitely going to recommend globalism. So you have a pushback on a personal level. You guys like Jon Vance is like, I don't want globalism, even though it's like the chess move or something like that. The computer is almost per force guaranteed to recommend globalism, and you could look at it like not even like a JQ type thing, where maybe not. It's beneficial for the Jews. Historically, Jews maybe have played a role in finance and banking, and it would benefit from globalism more than other peoples, due to disproportionately having numbers in fields like import, export, and banking that would benefit us from globalism. However, you're looking at purely the computer thing taking over. We no longer need a class of people to be import, export, like translations or having international people, that you could have the computer that would successfully be able to replace a priestly class and fulfill those functions. And the computer itself will be pushing for globalism, and the computer itself will be replacing the people that are the bearers of it. And there'll be room for people of creative thought and to program the machine and do different things and push the machine forward, because the machine's not going to push itself forward. Even like learning algorithms and machine learning, it's still basically all humans programming the machine to self-benefit itself. It's not actually the machine that does machine learning algorithms or artificial intelligence that might make it better, but they still need people that are the ultimate drive that push the machine forward. So it'd be interesting. Immigration, maybe, maybe not. Saying like globalism, yes. Like certainly the machine will push for globalism because you have a global supply chain. It's a fact. Whether that means necessitates, like when I did, if I get my 1,000 subscribers, I'll start doing it again, because the engineering conference season is coming up. There's going to be a automation conference coming up in August, and then you got the battery show and automotive testing expo. And certainly you'll see at these conferences people from all over the world, and the flow of technology and goods usually necessitates also the flow of people. So for example, if you have widgets that are being made in China, and then you ship those widgets here to America, or to Metro Detroit, and in Metro Detroit they take these widgets and make bigger machines, that usually there's a flow of people to go along with the widgets. You don't just get the widgets without the people. So if the widgets are being made by certain people in China, there's going to be a necessitate some of those people coming together with the product they're shipping. So I mean, there's a some connection. I spoke about that at the Foam Expo. If I did my ramble at the Foam Expo, where you saw these like Chinese companies, and saying like, yes, almost all of those companies that are coming from all over the world and selling their parts have local representatives in this area. So in Metro Detroit, you have thousands and thousands of like Chinese manufacturers that are making different widgets that are useful in the global automotive supply chain. And most of those places have local representatives from China that represent their company. And with in that, all over. So there is a connection to globalism and actually the migration of people. And it's an interesting thought to think about. And it's like as a chess player, I have to humble myself to the machine. I think about things, I have my understanding, but at the end of the day, I know as per fact the computer beats me every game. And when the computer tells me that one move is better than the next, I largely have to accept it. And that's likely to be the case for these different fields of politics and the solution to the problems that we're talking about. And so I guess that's the end of my ramble, as I'm hemorrhaging viewers. I guess thanks to Jon for coming on and enlightening us about some of the Canadian politics, and debating or talking with me about automation, which tomorrow hopefully will be interesting. Andrew Yang, I'm going to be there on scene tomorrow. I would like to meet Andrew Yang if it's possible. I could shake hands with him, get a selfie with him, share a few words with him. I don't know if that's possible, if he's going to be having like an after party where he actually shows up. It's possible. Tulsi Gabbard, I think she's actually having her after party the same place Bernie Sanders did, and she's supposed to show up there. So I don't know if I'll be able to get a selfie with her, but I'll check out the debates, and I'm going to keep these issues. People saw I put in the link. I did do a public study session on autonomous vehicles, and I did. I need my subscribers, so let me do a quick check before I signed off. I'll be in Detroit about 6 o'clock tomorrow. The protests, start about, some of them start early, but I figure I'll get there like 6, because I'm not going to hang out there all day, but I'll get there about 6 and probably stay till 8. And a lot of the protests, once the debates start, the protests kind of die out and people go into the different places for the watch parties. And then afterwards, like when the debate finishes, the different candidates, but the street action will largely be over by 8. So if I stick around at one of the watch parties, yeah, I don't know if I'll have internet. So I'm going to check right now the number of subscribers I'm up to. I need 1,000 to be able to live stream. Otherwise, I'm just going to have to record the video and upload it when I get home. And I'm only at 981. So I'm just not close enough. It's possible tomorrow maybe some of these videos will be more popular. I'm looking, let's see the analytics, how many watches I'm getting. So yeah, I'm looking at my analytics. I'll do a screen share, just seeing the likelihood that I'm going to get another 20 subscribers by tomorrow night. Doesn't look that likely. If any of my videos are that popular. So decent amount of watches. You could see I'm up to 981 subscribers, and that's just not enough. So if somehow I get 20 subscribers tomorrow, I'll live stream. Otherwise, I'm just going to record the videos, and then maybe I'll come home at about 8 o'clock, upload the videos, and maybe I'll do a post stream on the debates, or maybe I'll stick around. If I stick around in Detroit, then I won't upload the videos till later that night. And so I guess that's it. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. God bless. Let me do a quick overview of my Discord. So I got my Discord, and if people use Discord, okay. So I got Forex Shark. I modded him, and he's been helping out. He's been helping out with the technology. He understands programming a little bit. He even got me a bot in there. I got a bot that does something at a welcome screen. I'll show you some of these pictures I took also from the debate. Here's me with Turks in the back. The Young Turks were in Detroit, so I had to get a little selfie there. They were packed in there, like you couldn't move an inch. Here's the Democrats for Life. They said there's 4 current Congress people. Here's the tent outside of Tiger Stadium, the CNN, where they've been doing their broadcasts. You see all the people from Marianne. There's quite a few people standing out supporting Marianne Williamson. I was quite surprised. A picture of myself. A woman offered to take a picture, so with my flower garland, I'll probably make flowers again tomorrow. I got my traditional Hasidic chalot, just a pushta yid, a simple Jew, or just a simple cloth Hasidic garb flowers I picked myself. I'll probably do the same thing, pick more flowers and make another garland to wear tomorrow. Here's Bowling, former Fox News commentator, was walking around doing interviews outside of where the Young Turks were. That's me and Joel Pollack from Breitbart News. Here's just all the people in front of Bernie supporters, Green New Deal people. That's another one of Bowling and Pollack. Here's the after party for Bernie, the watch party. You can see the debates were just starting. I went home. So I probably could have plugged in my phone. I'm not sure if this place had a hotspot for internet. It's possible I could have uploaded the videos from there. I would have been able to, so tomorrow, I think Tulsi Gabbard is having her after party and watch party in the exact same place as Bernie's was tomorrow. So it's possible I would be able to upload the videos. I don't know if they have internet, and then, stick around and maybe even be able to meet Tulsi Gabbard. So I'll look into that. So if that's the case, that I'll be able to sit there, upload my videos, and stick around. That'd be kind of cool. So this was the Bernie watch party tonight at this bar and grill. Tomorrow, I think Tulsi's going to have that there. Here's me with my Masonic hand symbol. This is where the debates were, outside of Fox Theater. It's a beautiful theater inside. I have videos inside it. Here's one of the presidential candidates, Rusty, something, I forget his name. This man's a a reporter for some station. I forget which one. I recognized him. I couldn't. So this man was a presidential candidate. Here was the CNN Sucks band. Another report. You got a Palestine will be free sign with among the Green New Deal. I gave my flowers at the end. I put it on at the Bernie watch party. I put my flowers on top of the cutout of Bernie. And there's my video. So join anyone who's still watching. Yeah, thanks, Oswald. Subscribe. I'll even mod Oswald. You got a wrench. You've been watching me for a year straight. I give you a wrench because I saw your comment or whatever. So Oswald, I give you a wrench. So at my welcome room, I have like a stream media for promoting different videos, mostly my own, but if other people are in my Discord want to promote their own things, right now I got looks like 21 members in a bot, 21 and 20 plus me in a bot. I got a room for talking like Kabbalah, Torah, Israel, Jews. I got a room for science and consciousness, not much in it yet. A room for alt-right politics, a room for just schmoozing, random, a room for questions for Doooovid, for people who have specific things they want to talk with me, because a lot of these rooms are for people to talk with each other, not necessarily talk to me. So anyone has a specific question to Doooovid, join my Discord and do a question for me and questions for Doooovid. I got a room for chess and games. I have a room for Freemasonry, which I haven't started yet, but hopefully I'm going to be doing streams and educational stuff on Freemasonry. I have a room for World War II and the Holocaust. There's also a voice channel, so people in Discord, they want to talk to each other, they can. And there's a room for stocks and investing that's basically ran by Forex Shark. He's been posting interesting things, charts. He's like the T-Mobile merger and stuff on Bitcoin. So hopefully I'm going to be doing streaming and working together with Forex Shark. If Michael, if people are familiar with him, right now he's not on YouTube. He had issues, couldn't control himself enough to meet the YouTube standards. So I guess he's got 33 members, 8 currently online. He's advertising his Discord and mine. That's fine. I made him a mod. Okay, so that's it. Oswald, you post something, see your wrench? Or did he leave? He left, so... Okay, so take care, everyone. Have a great night. God bless. Appreciate you tuning in. If you can, subscribe to my channel. If you have multiple accounts, subscribe to it with your multiple accounts. Hopefully, I'll hit 1,000 by tomorrow, and I'll be able to do the Democratic debates live. So anyone who tunes in, seeing Doooovid for the first time, thanks for tuning in. Oliver, thanks for participating, being active in the chat. All good things. Thanks for tuning in. And John, thanks for coming on. And God bless. Take care.